Board to order. Please note that under 940 CMR 29.10 sub 5, Dean Charter will be participating remotely during the meeting due to a geographic distance of greater than 20 miles via video conference. Please note that a quorum is physically present. A roll call vote is required for any and all votes involving members participating remotely. First thing, as usual, is residents' concerns. If anybody locally has something they'd like to say, please go to the podium. We're limiting comments to 3 minutes.
Good evening. I hope everyone had a wonderful Thanksgiving. I come tonight.
Could you just identify yourself?
My name is Madeline Cruz, 2 Townhouse Lane. I come tonight to give Fran, Himaja, and David authorized release information from for the Acton Housing Authority to communicate with you guys and release emails and my records. And I also come to notify everyone that once again, my son was admitted on the 28th at Boston Children's Hospital for another asthma attack, and to tell you guys that there is active mold in my home. Someone from the community kindly paid for a lead test and a mold test and an air quality test to be performed in the home. And as long as we remain in this house, it's going to keep happening. And I will not be silenced. I will come as much as I can and make my voice heard. Thank you very much. I'm going to give these to you guys right now.
Thank you. Anyone else? Is there anyone online, Matt or Mark?
Mr. Chair, there's one hand up at this time.
Thank you, Matt.
Is from a call-in user. If they can identify themselves when they get on the line, you should be able to speak now.
Hi, it's Tara from West Acton. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Yes. Okay. So first of all, I'd like to support Madeline, and I hope that the town finds some money to help her with the back rent. That's my first comment. My second comment is that I'm in favor of the tenant advocate that's going to be presented maybe next week, and I don't know if I'll be able to be at that meeting, so I'm saying that in advance. Also, I'm hoping that the Board of Selectmen will consider, Select Board will consider doing a, asking voters if they would like to have the planning board be elected. And so I plan to do a petition in that regard, but rather that the Select Board bring it forward with a process that would include public forums and things like that. So anyways, thank you very much for allowing me to speak, and that's it.
Thank you.
I don't have any updates today. Does any member of the board have a member minute they'd like to? Jim.
Yeah, last time we didn't have member minutes, so I got stuff saved up. Let's see. Well, first some sort of forward-looking stuff. A couple things happening at the next meeting I wanted to make sure people knew about. That if it does continue to fit on the schedule, there'll be a policy to discuss the select board discouraging fossil fuel connections, both by having the staff prepare material to give to developers and owners early on in the process that lets them know about alternatives, all electric alternatives that reduce the climate impact of their building, and direction to the boards and committees that see these early stage applications to make sure that they ask developers if they have considered lower climate options and how they and if they have, why you know, how did it work out when they did the comparison. Another thing that would be coming up at some future meeting, but I don't know when, would be a proposal from me to move some of the housing ARPA money that we have in reserve to accelerate the delayed capital replacement items that we learned about from both from AHA and from residents such as Madeline Cruz. We know there's a large backlog of work that needs to get done. The state funding is entirely inadequate to the task. It stretches the task out over 20 years.
I think you shouldn't be discussing a matter we're going to discuss in the future that's not on the agenda now.
Okay, that's coming. I will stop talking about it. I'm looking forward to seeing the Water Resources Advisory Committee and the Acton Water District at the next meeting, if that fits. Just to acknowledge that many of the emails to the Select Board have been about water quality. So I'm really excited to keep that communication going between the Water Resources Advisory Committee and the Acton Water District and the Select Board. And in terms of, other climate emergency stuff, the Climate Action Plan is now ready with what they're calling a blueprint, which is a basic list of goals and strategies, and it's available for public review. Comments are due by the 10th, and we plan to be looking at it in the near future as well. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you. No?
I just wanted to just say how much fun it was. My fellow select board members and I volunteered at the Boston area Gleaners at Stonefield Farm, and it was a great day. We packed a lot of food boxes, and we also picked through a lot of squash, quality control. And I encourage anyone who's interested to volunteer. They're a great group. The director is fabulous. She has a great team working for her and working with volunteers, and it was a fun time.
Thank you. Mr. Manager, your update.
Thank you. Just a few things. We are starting the redo of the open space and recreation plan. This is a multi-year plan that was sort of expiring this year. So we've started a working group internally to look at the entire document. It's a beautiful document. The last time it was published 5 or 6 years ago, and we want to try to honor that. So we are reaching out to all boards and committees to seek a liaison from each board and committee to see if there's interest in being more actively involved in the update. And so it doesn't have to be now, but I'd also ask the board to consider the same if there's a liaison from the board, or the board can just entirely be involved, however you want to handle that. I want to acknowledge and thank the Finance Department. Director Steve Barrett is here tonight. They, for the 7th year in a row, received a distinction award from the GFOA for excellence in comprehensive financial reporting. So nice job, Finance Department. I wanted to just thank James McRae and Gail Sawyer and others who helped with the Veterans Day ceremony a few weeks ago. It was really nicely done, and just want to thank them for that. We have a new building commissioner, Tom Moberg. He has been working in the town as a building inspector, and he's earned a promotion, and now he's the building commissioner, and he's been off to a good start. So hopefully you get a chance to meet him if you haven't already. We have our first hybrid in the fire department. Our police department was aggressive in replacing cruisers over the last few years, and we're now starting with the fire department, and that was delivered last week, so we're excited about that. I want to thank several staff and volunteers who helped with pediatric clinics. We had our third yesterday, or Saturday, and we're vaccinating, we have been vaccinating about almost 600 youths, and it was a huge effort by a collaboration between our team, our public health folks, and the school district. So, and a lot of people volunteered their time from the staff to go out and help, so I appreciate everybody's efforts there. On that note, we are seeing a spike in cases. We actually reached our new peak over the weekend of 75 cases. It's down to 65 right now, or 68. But it is an alarming peak, but we do hope it is a peak and that we're on our way down in terms of cases. and we're closely monitoring what's happening with that. The Board of Health, I believe, is meeting on Wednesday to discuss COVID and other things. And the final update I wanted to mention is, sorry, I think I'm good. Oh, no, sorry, this is important. So we started a study, Director Corey York and our Sustainability Director, Andrea Becerra. We're working with the DEP as part of a technical assistance grant, and we're looking at our solid waste program and understanding whether the way that we're providing solid waste management services for the community is the most efficient, or whether there's other things that we should be looking at, primarily looking at the transfer station versus a curbside pickup model. So more to come on that. I just wanted to mention that that's underway. Thank you.
Thank you. Every year we have to have a tax classification hearing, and so I would invite up our assessor, and you're welcome to take a seat, Brian, if you wish, and I will read the legal notice for the tax classification hearing. The Select Board will hold a required annual public hearing on the issue of tax classification on December 6th, 2021 at 7:35 in the Faulkner Hearing Room, 204 of the Acton Town Hall. The Select Board members are required to hold this hearing annually and receive taxpayer comments as to whether the various classes of taxable property shall be taxed in the same rate, or whether different tax rates shall be applied to different classes of property. The hearing will include a presentation by the Board of Assessors dealing with options available under Chapter 40, Section 56 of the Massachusetts General Laws. Brian.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the Board of Selectmen, or the Select Board. So before we get into the presentation, I'm Brian McMullen, Principal Assessor for the town. I just wanted to give the board a quick rundown. The town manager sent out a memorandum back in November 16th on some of our property tax exemptions, outlining it, and then kind of showed some historical data in this particular chart here. And on the back side of this, if you notice, is kind of a breakdown or summary of those exemptions. And most of them are means tested. I just want to kind of give the board a rundown of those, because I think it's important that you understand some of the programs that we have in place. They're very different one from another. They all come with different sets of criteria. So there's a lot of different options here. But first off, I just want to state that these are all found under Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 59, Section 5. So the eligibility date for a property tax exemption here is the first day of the fiscal year, so July 1. So in order to qualify, you must meet the legal requirements, the criteria on July 1st of that year. You must meet the legal findings. It's state law. You have to comply. So if your income exceeds the legal amounts here outlined in this document, then you're not going to be eligible for that exemption. That's not the end all. There are other programs and other exemptions where the Board of Assessors, at their discretion, may grant some relief depending on your particular situation. So it's important to know that that's not a game stopper. So I think it's important that we encourage people to come forward, ask a lot of questions, getting into, and ask questions about the material, and the assessors will be more than happy to walk them through that. The last day that you can file for any exemption is April 1st, so there's plenty of time. So we have July 1 to April 1st. So I just wanted to put that out there. I think it's very important. The Board of Assessors have done a superb job at granting tax relief. They have big hearts and trying to get citizens some relief. So I just think it's important. These various programs are anywhere from senior exemptions, 70 or older, where there's an assets test but no income test. In some cases, there's asset and income tests. We have various programs for certain veterans with disabilities. We have other programs, like I said, hardship and a circuit breaker, where you're at the sole discretion of the Board of Assessors, and they've been extremely generous in that regard. So I just wanted to take that moment just to kind of highlight some of those. And if you have any further questions, I'll be happy to answer those. But I think it's important, and this document's out there, and it's on the webpage, and I think the town manager highlights that in this document as well. We also have a brochure with some of the details, but I always, again, encourage folks, if they have any questions or if they're looking for property tax relief, please send them our way.
So to send them your way, they should go to the Finance Department on the town website?
The Finance Department, right into the assessor's office, David.
Or call the Finance Department?
Yeah. And we'll be happy. And a lot of times, the paperwork is overwhelming, so we like to cut through the paperwork and tell them specifically what we need, and it helps them out tremendously.
Thank you.
So tonight's tax classification hearing, as you had mentioned, is a required hearing that has to be held annually. We have to do this hearing before we can set the tax rate. So these 4 votes tonight that will be discussed are imperative that we go through this material and understand the implications. So the Board of Assessors right now is currently made up of Carol Leipner-Schriebnick, she's the chair, Susan Miller, who's a longtime member, and Leo Fochman, our current member, who's sitting right here in back of me. Again, I'm Brian McMullen, Principal Assessor. So let's get into the material. So tonight's actions, as I said, requiring 4 votes. Those 4 votes are, you have to adopt a residential factor. What that means, we'll get into a little bit later. Whether adopt an open space discount, whether or not to adopt a residential exemption, and whether or not to adopt a small commercial exemption. So before we get into the adoption of those and what they mean, let's just look at and understand what tax classification is. So State Department of Revenue has us classified property into 4 major categories. These 4 major categories are: 1, the primary, residential. It's about 90% of our properties in town. And the remaining commercial, industrial, and personal property, commonly referred to as a CIP class, is the remaining 10%. So that's been done, that's been approved, and that's been signed off by State Department of Revenue. So just to kind of get a comparison of last year to this year's data, so what are property values doing? Well, here's a chart here that basically breaks out those categories. So single-family home being at the top, you see FY21 data, average single-family house of 617 versus the FY22 of 665. The delta being about close to $48,000 or a 7.8% increase. We've seen this in the Beacon newspaper, we've seen this in sales, we've seen this when our neighbors selling homes and neighbors buying homes. The average commercial property, you don't see as much as far as sales transactions, so we do an income approach to valuation. That's been pretty stagnant somewhat, although we did see some growth this year. If you look at the average last year of $996 and this year is $1,028,028. So a little bit of increase of $32,000 or 3.2% increase. In the industrial class, $946,000 last year compared to $1,028,245 this year. A little more growth, and a lot of this is just changes in valuation. Some of it could be attributed to new growth, new permits, and just the industrial is only a small segment of our total class. It's only about 100 parcels in the industrial class. And then the bottom one would be the average personal property account. So personal property, as we know, certain businesses have to pay property taxes based on that personal property that they own, that they have in place. And so that grew by about 3.6%. The bulk of all our personal property classes, the bulk of valuation is in the public utilities. So that's where most of that comes from. So continuing on, so if we look at that average single-family house, $617,000 compared to the FY22 $665 with a 7.8% increase. And if you look at last year's rate of 2023 and this year's proposed single-family rate of $1945, there's a 78-cent reduction in the rate, or a 3.9% reduction. If you look at the tax bill, you got $12,500 last year on average. This year's proposal is $12,950, so about a $450 uptick, 3.6. That's fairly consistent with what we told town meeting in June. So the numbers and the figures were based on, this is history, this is past, this is voter-approved budget back in June of 21. And in that ALG plan that was in the warrant, that pretty much is close to that targeted number. As you know, at that point in time, it was only a guesstimate of where we thought it would go. So I think it's important that we keep that in mind. So let's look at the average commercial industrial in comparison to the single-family home. So last year's average valuation for those two classes was $971,000 or $1,028,190. The difference being $57,000 or a 5.9% change. Again, the tax rate's the same. Keep on, assuming that it's a uniform rate of $1945, so that doesn't change. However, if you look at the tax bill, their increase is only about 1.8% in comparison to the residential sector. So again, a select board decision. So what's an adoption of a residential factor? Well, that's shifting the tax burden. So if the board so chooses to shift, they would be taking some of the tax burden from the residential class and shifting it to that CIP class. Well, how's that done? Well, it's done through the adoption of a residential factor. So first we have to determine those percentages borne by each class. That's done already. It's been submitted with the State Department of Revenue. They break it out for us. And so Acton shift could be 50% of the residential properties we could shift over to the CIP class. So pretty significant. And that's pretty standard throughout the Commonwealth of Mass. So when we talk about adopt a residential factor of 1 results in a uniform tax rate for all classes of property. So a $500,000 home is going to have the same bill as a $500,000 commercial property or a $500,000 personal property account. So adopt a residential factor of less than 1. That means they're no longer paying their fair share or their burden, but you're going to shift it. That increases that CIP class. So you're reducing the residential and you're increasing the CIP. So here's an example of a single-family home, that same average single-family home. So if you look here, with that again proposed single-family tax rate of 1945, a 5% shift would reduce that rate for the commercial, for the residential sector to 1933. Their bill would go from $12,950 down to $12,870. $80 savings. And then you can see what a 10% in, 10% shift impact would look like, as well as that 20%. So that's on the residential side. What does it look like on the commercial side? So here on the commercial side, that average $1 million commercial property with no shift, we see at a rate of 1945 has a $19,997. A 5% shift would increase that tax rate from 1945 to 2042, resulting in a $20,995 bill, a $998 increase. So again, if you look at a 5% shift for an average single-family home, they're saving $80, but you're putting about $1,000 on the average commercial property. So moving on, adopt a residential factor. So again, adoption of 1 means they have a uniform tax rate between all classes of property. Last year, the residential factor was 1, all the way stemming back all the way back to 2001. That was the last time we had a split rate. And then prior to that, it was 1996 for the prior 7 consecutive years. So it's something that we haven't done in quite some time. So adopt an open space discount. So presently, Acton has no property that are classified as open space. Most of the open space property we have are in chapter lands. Chapter lands have really deep, significant tax cuts, greater than open space. So we don't feel as if there's anything presently that would fall into this category. Adoption of a residential exemption. So this basically takes the taxable value of a taxpayer's principal resident. So it's not rental, it's not apartments, it's their principal, it's their place of domicile. And so it reduces it. Now, well, how do we do that? Well, it may be up to 35% of the average assessed value of all residential properties. That includes everything. That includes apartments, vacant land, and so on and so forth. That's about $553,000. So up to 35% of that's like $193,000. So what happens here? So that exemption basically reduces anything below it as long as it's your principal resident. So it's very complex, but it increases the balance of those residential properties above it. So it's just kind of an internal shift just within the residential community. Very complex. We have never adopted this, and not too many communities in the Commonwealth do. So adoption of a small commercial exemption, very similar sort of to the residential exemption. This reduces the taxable value of eligible businesses by up to 10%. So right now, the average commercial property being $1,028,000 is about 10% of that's about $100,000, a little over $100,000. And how does that work? Well, the valuation can't exceed $1 million, and nor can the number of employees exceed 10 employees. Now, when you talk about the valuation on a commercial property, that could be a commercial property that has multiple tenants in there. But every one of those multiple tenants has to be eligible for this exemption. So it can't be just one tenant in there or two tenants. All tenants in that building have to be eligible for the exemption. And so basically, up to 10% of that average works very similarly to to the residential exemption, where the lower price commercial properties receive the benefit, and everything above that is burdened with that extra amount of taxes they need to pay. It's a very complex exemption, and frankly, we're not even sure if the eligible businesses would be benefited from it, because we can't get into the lease agreements between the lessor and the lessee, so we don't know if this exemption would even be passed on. There's been about 300-plus properties that have been identified, and again, we've never adopted this exemption, and nor really do we recommend this. It's very complex, nor do we believe right now in this environment that it's, proper to do this, and we would maybe unnecessarily burdening some other commercial properties. So in summary, the board has those 4 decisions they need to make. First, we have to adopt that residential factor. That's a must in order for us to continue with setting the tax rate. So again, that adoption of a residential factor of 1 results in a uniform tax rate. Whether adopt to open space discount, we don't have any properties that are eligible for open space discount. 3, again, to adopt a residential exemption. It's nice, it sounds good, but it's very complex. And 4, whether to adopt a small commercial exemption. Again, given the complexity of it, and we don't think the benefit is there, again, we wouldn't necessarily agree with adopting a small commercial exemption. So,
Thank you. First, I'll allow members of the board here to ask Brian any question or make any comments you'd like. Then we'll take public comments, and then we'll do the four votes. So first, any members of the board with questions or comments?
Sure.
Jim.
So large apartment buildings, multifamily apartment buildings, are those residential or commercial?
which ones, Jim?
Large multifamily houses.
Oh, multifamily are all considered residential.
Okay.
Even the big apartment complexes, those are all considered residential.
And the only other question I had was, when you mentioned personal property and that it was largely utilities, I see that as we have more solar developments, we're developing payments in lieu of taxes. And I wanted to understand if those payments are any part of this system or not, or whether they're just entirely separate.
Could you repeat that?
Sorry.
I'm just having a hard time with your mask.
Let's try taking the mask off. I'll step away from David. So pilot agreements that we have with, various large solar developers.
Yes.
Is that income any part of the tax classification, or is that just an entirely separate piece?
Yeah, that's a separate piece.
Right.
And even under the small commercial exemption, the personal property is held harmless. They're taken out of that equation. So any kind of shift within that commercial class is only between the commercial and the industrial. The personal property component is held separately, so it's not impacted by it at all.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
That's it.
Imager, please go ahead.
Thank you. That was a really informative presentation and a huge learning experience for me. My question is with regards to the residential factor. You did mention it in fiscal year 21 that we had a factor of 1. I was wondering if you could talk about previous years, like fiscal year 20 and so forth. Has it typically been 1? And what do other towns do? Is it around 1 as well?
Just regarding the residential exemption the residential factor being 1, when was the last time it was anything different?
I'm sorry, John.
When was the last time the residential factor was not 1?
2001, 20 years ago, 21 years ago.
Got you.
So
Thank you.
it's been 21 years. with a uniform single rate.
Thank you.
Fran or Dean? Nothing from Dean? Fran?
A lot of my questions were answered when you pointed out the letter that I had not seen. Thanks.
Okay, if any member of the public would like to make a comment, please come up to the podium. Maybe, Brian, you could shift a little over or sit down at the table. Let members, anybody in the public like to make a comment? If someone else wants to make a comment after Ann, I would ask you to line up and not wait, please.
I would,
Please go ahead.
what?
Please,
I would urge you to,
please identify yourself.
excuse me, I'm Ann Chang, South Acton. I would urge you to keep a uniform tax rate. When I first joined the EDC, when was it? A million years ago, and then quit, and then joined again. The EDC, the Economic Development Committee, thinks that, when I first joined, the difference between the commercial and the residential was like 18 for residential. It's now down to 10, for commercial, it's now down to 10. And it will be a burden on businesses to shift the tax burden from the residential to the business. So I implore you to keep it uniform.
Thank you. Seeing no one else in the room here, Matt, could you call on the people online, please?
Yeah, of course, Mr. Chair. The call-in user. Call-in user should be able to speak. If they could identify themselves again, that would be great.
Hi, this is Tara. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. So I have two questions. The first one is I think I heard, it was hard to hear because there's an echo in the room, but did Brian tell us about the number of people participating in the senior tax exemption gift that we are doing for people that are of a certain income and asset qualification, with a number of people that are participating?
Okay, and what's your other question?
Oh, and the reason is that, well, I was going to have a follow-up thing, but just to say that there are 400 people in Acton that are making less than $17,000 a year. So I just want to make it clear that increasing the budget allowed through the senior tax and encouraging doing any marketing to promote that, to get folks to come in and have it treated like a gift, not somebody coming and begging for charity. So thank you. The second thing is, I would like very much to know if we can charge huge companies more, the large CVS, the Staples, and maybe adopt a split rate and give a split rate on businesses and give small businesses an exemption, a very serious discount, and keeping the residential the same. So I would like to know if that's possible, and if so, what steps are to investigate that. I shouldn't say if it can be. I would like to know how it can be done. It should be clear.
Okay, thank you. We'll see if we can get your questions answered.
Her first question, Brian, was how many people in town take advantage of the various forms of tax relief available? Do you know how many people do that?
I don't know off the top of my head. I know if you look at this chart, back in FY16, we granted about $380,000 in tax relief. This past year, at 6/30, June 30th, 6/30, fiscal 21, it was $604,000. So I know there's probably some more. I don't know if there's definitely more people taking advantage of it. It's probably somewhere between 300 and 400 people, but I don't know. I'd just be guessing. The problems with no, I'll just leave it at that.
So, but hundreds of people.
There is.
Yes.
There is.
And then her other question was whether it was possible to differentiate between small and large businesses and offer small businesses a discount. And let me see if I can answer that based on your thing. So the only thing that we could do is to adopt a small commercial exemption. And what that means is for each property, all the tenants in the property have to be classified the same. So if you have a large chain business mixed with small businesses, From you can correct me if I'm wrong, but from what you said, that you couldn't classify them all the same way. And it's also complicated because you need to rebalance the taxes across all the businesses in town again. Thank you. Matt, could you call on the next person, please?
Yes, next one will be Deborah Symes. Deborah, you should be able to speak.
Hi, sorry for the delay. Thank you. Let me lower my hand. Deborah Symes, 109 Concord Road. Quick comment and then a question. I'm going to make my semi-annual plea for the board and town staff and residents and everybody in Acton to stop talking about tax burden and tax relief and start talking about taxes as investments, and when abatements are appropriate for any kinds of taxes, let's call them that, because it really sets a framework that I find annoying at best. So that's just a little editorial thing. And then my question, Brian, is I can't remember what it's called, the principal residence exemption, whatever that's called. Does this mean that, I mean, it means that people like me who just have one place could take advantage, if we instituted this, could take advantage of this, whereas people who have who own multiple properties could not? And likewise, does it mean that people who have property in town just as an investment property would not be able to participate in that?
Yeah, Deborah, that's a good question. So we find that most of these cases are cases that they have investment properties or they have multiple properties, then they probably would not be eligible for these programs. So in a lot of cases, they would fail the assets test. And what I mean by that, their assets have to be at a certain level. So if they had other properties, that would have to be considered as an asset, and then that would probably disqualify them from this program. So they would not be eligible. The only case...
And can I ask a follow-up or no?
Yes, please direct your questions to me, and I'll direct them to...
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. No problem.
I forget this all the time. Thank you. So this is really more of a comment, I guess, which is I don't understand this exemption well, because I really am just learning about it now. And that was a really helpful presentation, by the by. But I would, if my understanding is anywhere near accurate, it sounds like, you know, we can't means test people in terms of taxes, like you pay what you can afford. But this sounds like it would be a step for people of lesser means to get a, you know, who happen to own a house, let's say, but, you know, are feeling slammed by real estate taxes, which I will very soon be one of them. It sounds like this is a way to sort of get at that and give people who are not particularly affluent a bit of a break. Am I wrong in that assessment?
You want to do it or me?
I think I got it.
Okay, go ahead, please.
Correctly, Deborah, we have, one of the programs we have as a Clause 18, it's a hardship application. So under a hardship application, the Board of Assessors has no hard and fast rules. So they don't set any criteria of what the asset level is, nor do they set the criteria what the income level is. And why they do that is because everybody's situation is unique unto themselves. And so they look at that compared to what they're seeing as far as other applications. So for instance, somebody may have, at 95 years old, they may have $500,000 sitting in the bank. And at 95 years old, the likelihood of them spending that is probably not going to be too likely. And I'm going to extremes. But then somebody at 65 years old, that's the only income, that's the only asset they have. That's a whole different scenario at somebody at 65 versus 95. And again, these are very broad. But and so the selectmen, the assessors. The assessors, at their discretion, will look at that on a case-by-case basis. So it really depends on the individual circumstances, where there are no hard and fast rules. You know, in some cases, they're just temporary hardships. Maybe somebody took ill and they were unable to work for a while, whatever the circumstances, but they take that all into consideration. So there are no hard and fast rules. So these aren't just an open, closed case. There are some where there's wiggle room and flexibility, and they look at it whether this is a short-term problem or a long-term problem. So it's pretty flexible.
Great, thank you, Brian.
Seeing No one else? I think we can close the public hearing, and then we can discuss what we'd like to do on these. So I will take a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second?
Okay, motion's been made and seconded. Jim, would you call the roll, please?
Okay, to the question of closing the hearing, Select Board Member Charter, what do you think?
Aye.
Okay, Imogen Nagaredi,
Aye.
Brian Arsenault,
Aye.
David Martin,
Aye.
Jim Snyder Grant. I say aye too, that's unanimous, we're closed.
Okay, now, I would suggest maybe we go through these one at a time and see if there's anybody who wants to discuss them, and then when we're out of discussion points, we vote. Does that sound okay? Okay, so the first one, to adopt a residential factor. Any comments or questions on that, or discussion among ourselves? Pretty straightforward. Yeah, I think one of the things here, since we have a almost 10-to-1 residential to business, if we, for each dollar that we discount residences, business taxes go up by $10. So it's a tough one. So I would take a motion to adopt a residential factor of 1.0, resulting in a uniform tax rate of $19.45.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, the motion's been made and seconded. Any final discussion? Jim, would you call the roll, please?
Sure. On the question of the residential factor of 1.0, Dean Charter, what do you say?
Aye.
Imogen Nagaredi,
Aye.
Brian Arsenault,
Aye.
David Martin,
Aye.
Jim Snyder Grant also says aye. That's unanimous.
The next item, to adopt an open space discount, and Mr. McMullen says we don't have any open space properties that count, so I would take a motion to not to adopt an open space discount.
So moved.
And is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Jim, would you call the roll, please?
Okay, to this question of not adopting an open space discount, Dean Charter.
Aye.
Imogen Nagaredi,
Aye.
Fran Arsenault,
Aye.
David Martin,
Aye.
Jim Snyder Grant also says aye. That's unanimous.
Adopting a residential exemption. Any questions or comments people would like to make?
I look forward to studying this more in future years in case there's a way of making this actually do what it's supposed to do. I understand that the way it's designed doesn't work particularly well, but the goal of it seems laudable. I would not want to adopt it this year, but it's intriguing to me, I will say.
I think it can be, not only complicated to implement, because you have to reapply the tax levy for the discount, and including the factors that qualify people. But I think it's somewhat intended, I actually don't know the background, but somewhat intended for places like the Cape, so they can soak people who don't live there year-round. And then, but applying it to properties that are residential but large, like large multifamily dwellings, I think increases the expenses for people who rent. So they're not necessarily getting the effect. If we have, it's just complicated. And then also, how many people would qualify for the residential, and having to reapply the residential levy across all of them, and then if it's a 10-to-1 thing, it's, discounting primary residents for each dollar might increase other ones by an order of magnitude or something. But yeah, we certainly can be studied and looked into for future years. Any other comments? Dean, any comments or?
No comments.
Okay, I would take a motion then to not to adopt a residential exemption.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Jim, would you call the roll, please?
Yeah. Motion not to adopt a residential exemption. Dean Charter.
Aye.
Imogen Agaretti.
Aye.
Fran Arsenault.
Aye.
David Martin.
Aye.
Jim Snyder Grant, also aye, unanimous.
And finally, adopting a small commercial exemption similar to the last one, except for small businesses instead of, residential properties. Any comment or question or discussion? Seeing none, then, I would take a motion not to adopt a small commercial exemption.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Jim, would you call the roll, please?
Yeah, okay, on this motion not to adopt a small commercial exemption. Dean Charter.
Aye.
Imogen Agaretti.
Aye.
Fran Arsenault.
Aye.
David Martin.
Aye.
Jim Snyder Grant, also aye. That's unanimous. There's your 4 questions.
Thank you very much, Brian.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just need to advise the Select Board that this results in untaxed levy capacity of about $429,000. So that's part of this hearing as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, I would, for our next item, I would invite the Finance Committee to come up and join us. We are going to have, this part of the meeting is a joint budget presentation with the Select Board and Finance Committee. Yes, we can share, definitely. And one person can take the okay.
I've always wanted to be manager for GENDA. It's not really a day, is it?
Thank you, Mark. Madam Chair, you want to call your meeting to order?
Noting the hour in the presence of a quorum, I call this meeting of the Acton Finance Committee to order. I would ask that we please elevate Jason Cole to active participant. Please note that under 940 CMR 2910, one member will be participating in the meeting remotely via video conference due to a geographic distance of greater than 20 miles. A quorum is physically present. Roll call votes are required when members are participating remotely. And thank you for having us to this joint meeting.
Thank you. Mr. Manager, your presentation.
Good.
We should maybe, oh, no, Jason is on. Good. Okay, we're all set.
Thank you. Good evening. Nice to see all of you. Very excited. This is always a fun night for me and for everyone to present to the Select Board, and it's even better now because we get to do it to the Finance Committee as well. So thank you for having a joint meeting for this presentation. I wanted to thank the departments that worked very hard this year to put this budget together. If you recall, we had town meeting less than 6 months ago. And we didn't really book what happened at town meeting until a few weeks after that. And we were already starting on planning for this budget. So a lot happened in the last few years that shifted our budget schedule all over the place. And we worked very hard to get it back on track this year. And it was a lot of hard work from the team here, everyone across the organization, but in particular the finance department, town manager's office, human resources, really working very hard for this. So thank you to everybody. This budget is something that, let's see, all right, we're working here. So here's the schedule. So a few weeks ago, we presented the capital plan. During the pandemic, we created our very first 10-year capital plan, and in the 6 months since our last town meeting, we've also updated that capital plan and made a presentation to a joint body just like this a few weeks ago. We got some very helpful initial feedback from the Finance Committee and the Select Board, and here we are tonight with the presentation of the budget. In a few weeks, in 2022, we'll be having a budget workshop in this room for a few hours on a Thursday night, and then between then and May, the warrant is posted, and then on May 16th, we have town meeting where the residents consider this budget. So a lot of work still to do, but this is certainly a big part of it from my perspective, and I'm excited to talk to you more about what we're proposing. So just a few highlights. I mentioned earlier in the meeting that the Finance Department was recognized for its 7th straight year for excellence in financial reporting. Also, as part of the borrowing that we did earlier this year, S&P reaffirmed our AAA bond rating, which is a big deal. It helped us bring in a huge debt offering at a good, very competitive rate because of the work we've done to have a good bond rating. It's worth mentioning again all the efforts that people across the organization and volunteers in the community have put forth to help with the COVID response. It's an ongoing project. A few other things that are happening. We have some grants that we've been receiving, a lot of them actually. Most recent one is $90,000 for Great Road to help re-envision that corridor. And again, relief programs for residents impacted by COVID, relief programs for businesses. We've done a lot of that, and we continue to do that, including helping the food pantries, helping micro-enterprises, helping families with child care subsidies. A lot of resources put into that and a lot of work by our staff to make that happen. So the board did its goal setting in August and identified short-term goals. The budget that was published earlier this afternoon is reflective of those goals, both the short-term and the long-term. There are 11 short-term goals. Some in particular that we'll be talking about more in a few minutes are the diversity and equity goals. We have also social service goals and other things such as helping the tree crew, improving the website, increasing sidewalk construction, reviewing bylaws with sustainability and equity goals in mind, and continuing to explore ways to make Acton more business friendly. Those are all things that we've tried to address in this budget. In the middle of the budget planning, we were closing out the CARES funding. We received just over $2 million to help our community respond to the pandemic. Just about half of that was provided to the school district to help with its response efforts. The remaining portion was used for various things and continues to be used as we close out that funding this month. And I think we really leveraged that to do a lot of important things, and I'm very excited about how that worked out. We also had a new batch of funding from the federal government called the American Rescue Plan. The Select Board held a very robust community engagement process earlier this year to identify an investment plan for that funding, and that's available. The investment plan is available at actonma.gov/ARPA. It's also as an appendix to the 10-year capital plan, and we were able to invest in several things over the next 3 years to help with our response to the pandemic and also offset some of our capital needs that have been deferred due to lack of funding, and offset some of the things that we were looking to do this year. And, so this is a breakdown of what the board approved. They allocated just over $5 million in FY22 and FY23 to be used and kept the remaining portion in reserve. Those reserves were sort of earmarked in several ways, but it's a reserve which any funding to be expended from that would require a vote of the board to be allocated before doing so. And the big thing that we're working on as it relates to federal relief programs is infrastructure. So I just wanted to take a few minutes to tell the board and the Finance Committee some of the things that we've been doing as it relates to infrastructure, because we feel it puts us in a good position with a lot of the federal funding that we think will be coming down the line from the Build Back Better and the other recent federal stimulus approved. Kelly's Corner, that's a big deal. That's 20 years in the making. That $18 million project is starting in fiscal year 23. It's finally happening, and we're all very excited to see that come to fruition and what it's going to do for our community, and it all starts next year. We've been doing some sidewalks and some complete streets. We've been working with our state partners to identify how to help our great road businesses recover. We started rehabbing our South Acton wastewater treatment plant facility. We think that town meeting approved that last year, and that's an important step to keep that system running properly. We're reconstructing the Acton Center right outside this building to make it safer for pedestrians, cyclists, and everyone else. The board recently approved a new plan for Hayward Road to install a traffic light there and to make that intersection safer for everybody. We're in the process of designing a redesign to the 19 to 21 Maple Street property that we repurchased a few years ago to make that a better access to the T station and easier for pedestrians and everyone else to utilize. We're redesigning intersections on Prospect and Main. We're looking at rail crossings in every place the rails cross streets. We're looking at the traffic pattern on River Street to see if we can make it safer by potentially making it one way. We're looking at all the high street safety audits and other things we've done to make short-term improvements to traffic safety. Recently, we created a four-way stop on High Street to make it safer. And Mass DOT is planning some pretty significant changes to the Piper Road at Route 2 crossing, which I know people often ask about. That's in the planning phases. And they're also looking at the route through at Main Street, right over here by the bridge. So a lot of infrastructure happening. And so shifting to our local finances, something that's been a focus of our team in the last 3 years is to reducing our reliance on reserves to operate the town. And we took a very focused effort starting in 2018 to shift any funding away from using reserves for operating and making sure that we were using it for capital only. And that trend has continued. We also pushed very hard to have turnbacks from the departments to make sure that we could replenish our free cash, to have our reserves be more stabilized, which helped us maintain our AAA bond rating. And it's important that we're going to continue doing that. So our reserves are back on track, and we want to maintain that going forward. And this budget that's been presented, that will be presented tonight, would achieve that balance. Some of the things that we were working on and some of the challenges that we faced were, it's sort of a every year challenge, but it's still something that's very real this year. Health insurance. The rates from our health insurance trust, we believe, will be increasing 10%, which is a substantial increase over last year. Our pension assessment continues to go up more than we'd like it to, and that's going up 6.6%. So those two items alone really take up a big allotment of the new funding that we have for this year. We also have 4 collective bargaining agreements that are expiring or will expire by the end of this fiscal year, just because of the way the timing works out. And so those are things that we'll be working on this year, but they will not probably be settled by town meeting. Hopefully they will, but it's not likely that they all will be. We also have $76 million in capital needs that we identified on November 15th. We know that we can't fund all of those within the means and the resources that we have. And so part of the challenge is every year evaluating what we can do, trying to figure out ways to accomplish as much as we can, and then redoing the plan. So we're always looking 10 years out, but we're always focused on things that we can do each year. And the other thing is staffing needs. We haven't added staff in the last 3 years. We actually had a hiring freeze for a good portion of the time. And some of the departments are really in need of some retooling, and we did as much as we could by reorganizing things, and we'll always do that. But I think there's going to be additional pressure in future years for additional staffing in certain areas, which we'll continue to monitor and hope that we can continue to find ways, creative ways to address those needs without adding to our budget. And then the ongoing response and recovery to the pandemic. It's an ongoing thing. So we don't know what that looks like, but we're doing our best to work on it. When we developed the budget this summer, we said, look at reorganizations, look at ways to improve customer service, focus on the select board goals, and make sure you're looking at equity and mental health. So there are several investments in the budget book. I wanted to just highlight 8 of them in this presentation. The first is infrastructure. We'll be we're proposing a substantial investment in sidewalks. I don't get too many complaints here in town, but one thing that I hear a lot of every week, maybe, or at least every month, is I need a sidewalk, we need more sidewalks. When the sidewalk near my house is going to be built? I thought we were going to have a sidewalk here, et cetera. And sidewalks are important to people, and I think that we've been trying to contribute to our sidewalk funding. We did $500,000 2 years ago. I think we did a few $100,000 last year. That sounds like a lot, but it really isn't when you're building sidewalks. You need to make a substantial investment if you want to make progress on the backlog. We have, I believe, $17 million worth of needs identified in our backlog of priority sidewalks. These are sidewalks that the Sidewalk Committee prioritized several years ago, and we've been chipping away at it. But I think what I'm recommending is that we make a substantial investment and do a program to develop a design program for a bunch of sidewalks this year, and then in a future year, seek a major investment from the community to build all the sidewalks. And so that's something that I look forward to talking to the board and the Finance Committee about. We're also looking at making sure that we're keeping up on our bridges, and again, preparing for any federal money, but we want to do some design work on several bridges, some traffic studies on Main Street near Central and in West Acton. We want to have a more active management program for our dams. We learned a lot in the last 2 years about River Street and how much work it is, and so we want to make sure we get far ahead of any other dams that are in town so that they don't become a future for us or for somebody someday. Stormwater compliance. Stormwater is a very big part of public works and a lot of what we do here, and we do as best we can to fund it, but it's a growing need. The federal government has a lot of mandates that they continue to add to us, and so we're going to chip away at that as well. And then asset management, we're going to make sure we have a better sense of all the things we have out there so we can do a better job of maintaining them. One area of concern in this community, and I think in most communities, is mental health. And I think our community has done a very good job of doing and being proactive in helping our community and residents. In the area of our police, I think we've done an outstanding job of being proactive, and we've been part of a partnership with several other communities to have a jail diversion coordinator, which is basically a social worker for the police department. We utilize that person 1 day a week. Through the hard work of our police department, we actually received a grant from DMH to have a full-time person. And so we're in the process of background check right now. We're about to hire somebody, and they will be available 40 hours a week or whatever it takes to help our community and help our police officers with mental health needs of our community. And as you can see in this chart, the blue line is arrests, which have hovered in the 100 to 150 mark. But right now, we're doing just as many Section 12s as we are arrests. And a Section 12 is an involuntary detainment related to mental health. So it's an emerging need, and these resources will help address that. So great work by the police department for getting that grant, and we look forward to introducing to you the new co-response clinician, hopefully early in January. Sustainability is a big focus here in Acton. I'm looking forward to the Climate Action Plan roadmap that'll be presented next Select Board meeting, and we have some funding in the budget to make sure that we're able to support any initiatives that come from that roadmap. The Sustainability Director we created mid-budget a few years ago, and with a plan to phase it into the budget. We're at the end of the phasing in, and now it's fully part of the budget. So that's a big step. We're also looking to create a new analyst position. We do a lot of compliance. Public Works does a lot of compliance work, not just stormwater. We run a treatment plant. We run a transfer station. We do have all these heavy engineering compliance responsibilities, and having an analyst to help us with all the reporting will really be helpful. This is a position that would be supported through user fees and revenue, so it wouldn't be part of the general fund, but it's something that would help the Public Works, it would help the Sustainability Director, and it would be a really helpful way to continue the work that we do in the compliance field. We're also looking to continue to transition to electric and hybrid and get all of our buildings using 100% green energy. We're pretty much there now. Some projects that we're going to look at, we had proposed an electric cat in the budget initially, but we're also applying for a grant, and we think we have a pretty good chance at it. So we hope that'll work out. We're going to look at several other programs, hopefully coming from the roadmap that'll be presented in a few weeks. I look forward to talking to the community and the board more about. This is a need that the fire department has identified, a need for more staffing for the last few years. The chief has asked me every year for more staffing, and I've said, no, we can't, I'm not even going to bring that forward, I'm sorry. It's not good timing. And I think it really is something that we have a creative way to address the staffing need. Usually when you hire firefighters, you need to hire 8 because you have to fill 4 shifts. But what we're proposing to do here is to hire 2 and to have these 2 work on the ambulance only and have them work only during the daytime for a day shift, which is the highest, which we believe is the highest volume for medicals and the most time that we get back-to-back calls that we can't handle. And so we think that if we're going to increase staffing, targeting it to the most high demand time is the best way to do it. And so we want to try this out, and we think it'll work. The funding would be in the form of an increase to the subsidy to cover the salary and related costs. It will likely increase revenue. We'll be able to capture more calls. We don't want to project what that increase would be at this point. That's partly why we want to do it. And we'll continue to evaluate to make sure that it makes sense. We are starting a study right now to create a diversity position. Town meeting last year approved a study and a new position, and that study is underway. We're going to look at the organization and all the operations that we have and where a position like this might fit best, rather than just hire someone and throw them in an office. We want to do this right and very thoughtfully. So that's a process that's starting right now, and we'll be working on that with stakeholders through the spring, and we'll hopefully be hiring somebody early this summer. The funding for that new diversity position is in the budget. Last year was a capital request. This year it's in the budget to make it part of the operations that we have. And another thing I wanted to mention is a new fair housing legal review. One of the select board goals was related to ensuring that bylaws are looked at with the lens of equity. And this particular project that the planning director is proposing would be looking at any new bylaws that come forward and having them go through a specialized review from a civil rights, a special attorney, to make sure that anything that's being proposed is appropriate in terms of equity and providing recommendations to make sure that they are. So that's an exciting new program that's very much responsive to the select board's goals. This, the dam I mentioned earlier, this is a picture of the dam this summer when it was raining very hard. It's something that we need to breach to allow the water to flow the way that it wants to flow. It's a project that we're working on many fronts. It's a project that's going to cost approximately $1.8 million. In the end, we'll have something that looks like this with stuff. This is a view of the dam. This is a conceptual rendering by our resident artist, Tom Tidman, and it's showing the dam breached with some historic elements remaining, and then also not shown here would be a parking lot and a way for a community to access the site and have it be a park. So in this budget is funding to help with the dam breaching process. We're funding this in several ways through Community Preservation Act existing funds. We're requesting additional funds from Community Preservation Act, and we're also seeking grants from the state. The board has also allocated $500,000 to the stormwater management components of this project, of which there are many. And so we're really working hard to spread out the cost of this appropriately, but also complete this project, which is urgent for many reasons, especially we had a very rainy summer. So another goal of the board is to increase our ability to maintain our trees. Trees are a very popular service that we provide here. And so what we're looking to do this year is actually do some realigning of resources, and we're creating a pilot program to hire out contractors to do some mowing. In the summer, sometimes our crew mows twice a week, certain parcels. And so that really limits their ability to do anything else other than mowing. And so the thought here is if we contract out some of the mowing, it'll free up the staff that we already have to do more of the specialized work like tree work and roadside maintenance, things that we know we need to do better with. So that's something that we're looking to do this year, in addition to adding another seasonal staff to help with everything that they need to do. We keep our roads, as we build new sidewalks, as we make improvements, those improvements need to be maintained. And so that's part of what we're doing here. And so as I mentioned a few weeks ago, we presented the capital improvement plan that looks at 10 years. As part of the process of developing this budget, we had to revisit what was initially proposed in FY23 to make it fit. We wanted to deliver a budget that met within an appropriate funding level. And so the projects that we're proposing are $437,000 from free cash. We have a net zero vehicle replacement project, a shade tree assessment, some stormwater management compliance, some work on the existing fire stations related to fire alarm systems and septic tanks. And we're looking to recodify our zoning bylaws and develop a public art plan. For borrowing projects, we are looking to borrow to achieve the process of the River Street Dam that I just discussed in the amount of $750. We want to invest another $220,000 in complete streets and intersections. We want to invest $750,000 in the sidewalk program with the eye of future years investing significantly more. But as this being the year to make a large investment, to do a lot of design work, to focus on in finishing this plan, this backlog of streets, and then again the bridge and design construction. So just to show you what's changed from the plan that was presented a few weeks ago, some things that we had to change. Two projects we thought fit very nicely into what the board approved under ARPA for providing fresh air to public facilities. So we were proposing to fund those from that. The fire records management and the cruiser project, the fire thing we have to do right now, so we're figuring out how to do that. And the cruiser laptop, we had a very good suggestion to look at leasing them, and we found that to be a much more advantageous way to do that. And we're able to use the funding that was appropriated last year to cover the first year lease, and so we'll defer the second year till next year. So thank you for that suggestion. And as I mentioned earlier, we withdrew the ECAT proposal because we're going to seek grants and also look closely at the federal programs coming down. The public art plan was in at 25, it was reduced to 15 to make the budget work. And the sustainability programs, the board allocated $100,000 in this year for that, so we feel that this would be a year to pull back on that capital to allow the ARPA to cover the costs. So, with all the capital and the municipal operations and the changes to the subsidies, the total increase over last year is 3.35%. Part of that is an increase in our municipal operations of just over 3%, an increase of subsidies primarily related to the medical response staffing that I mentioned, and a minor decrease in capital from last year. And so that's the recommended budget. Thank you for listening. I really look forward to all of your questions. And thank you.
Thank you. So I thought maybe we'd have the Finance Committee members comment. I thought maybe we'd have the Finance Committee members comment and ask questions, and then the Select Board members, and then I'll call on open the floor to members of the public to comment. Do you want to call on people? Want me to call on people? Okay. I'll start down the end. Dave? Actually, I think, Adam, you could scoot your microphone down a little bit. You have about 3, not too much. That's it. No. Oh, you.
Hi, thanks for presenting that information, and thank you for getting out the more comprehensive budget this afternoon. I haven't fully digested that. I guess just one question looking at these slides that comes to mind is if it would be possible to get maybe a more holistic view of just the head count that had been held off over those 3 years you mentioned during, I think it started in FY 17 or 18, and you said it was flattish until now, and then understand what the head count looks like with these new hires going into that. I'm sure you have that available. I just don't have it off the cuff. And then the other items, at least from my perspective, for the FY23 budget, I think they're pretty close to in line and capital-wise what we had discussed several weeks ago. I would like to understand a little bit more about the permanent hires and those positions. So I'll need to look over the budget, I think, in a little more detail to answer anything more comprehensive, or to ask anything more comprehensively in that aspect. But that's all I have for now.
So you, just so you know, you'll have, you can ask questions in the meantime, and then we have budget Thursday.
Yeah.
In about a month and a half.
In about a month and a half. So, I mean, maybe that's a question for the group, is just what's the process, is go through the document and review this material here, and then send questions through Christine to John via that normal process. Is that how we would think about that? Yeah, so some of my comments may be premature, but I'm sure you have the head count information like that handy. We always like to ask those questions.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Manager, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that because normally we would present to the select board, and then the select board would deliberate and then transmit to the finance committee. I think for good reasons we're bringing everyone at the table early now, and so in terms of the, it sounds like it's far away that 6 weeks is the budget workshop, but I think that would be the best way to approach sort of the bigger questions, because our departments are preparing for that presentation that night.
Yeah, and just to be clear, it's recognized the earlier look at this information is well appreciated from my perspective, so just get that out there.
Thank you. Christy.
Thank you for doing this, John. I appreciated that at the beginning you have the goals of the select board, and you gave some indication of which projects were tied to approaching each goal or trying to satisfy them to some degree. I would love to see numbers along those where applicable, like the sidewalks you said, I think $17 million to do the whole plan, just because we all have goals, and having a concept of how much those are costing us gives us an idea of how much the goals are really doable within a short time period or a long time period, need to be planned out for further. So I would love to see that if possible. Also, before Budget Saturday, I'd love to understand the inflation assumptions. It's something we're hearing a whole lot about in general. And ownership costs of things like the sidewalks, as you mentioned, maintenance, et cetera. Specifically curious whether we would need any additional staffing because we do the plowing and general sidewalk maintenance. So things I will send these questions to Christine for. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike?
Yeah, hi, John. Thanks for your effort. As usual, you have put a lot of research and energy into this plan. But as was previously mentioned, we're going to need time to digest this. I know we will have specific questions and maybe some issues with some, line items, some specific projects or programs where we'll be asking for more detail on justification and so on. So we'll be using the next 6 weeks to do our own research and formulate opinions and questions that hopefully we can get answers from you. Thank you.
Isha?
John, thank you for that presentation. I commend you and your team for putting together a lot of work. I think from my perspective, I'd like to see a little bit of the breakdown of what the investment for the sidewalks will be. And I think you have some of it in the budget. I was only able to glance at it. And then I would like to understand exactly what the sustainability analyst would be doing, considering that will be a full-time position. Thank you.
Adam. Christine?
Thank you, John. A great presentation. I feel like it gets more detailed and relevant and easier to digest every year, honestly. I'm curious, there's a lot of talk about difficulty in finding workers and in job turnover and a lot of people leaving the workforce and seeking other types of experiences. Are we seeing any of that kind of turnover in the town staffing, or has it been pretty stable?
There's been some turnover, but we've been getting a very good response to our job postings. We're hiring a finance clerk. Today we had interviews this morning. We had a few dozen applicants, a handful that were very good. So one area that we are having a lot of trouble recruiting is the fire department.
Okay.
And so that's part of the approach here is we're trying to take a different approach to the hiring to see if this new program would attract maybe more people in a different role that many communities don't have.
Is that something that's happening statewide, nationwide, or does it seem to be a local issue with finding fire department staff?
Yeah, there's a demand for paramedics.
Okay.
I think the pandemic created a gap for a lot of development of paramedics, and so I think most communities are having trouble recruiting them right now.
Okay.
We just brought on a few this fall, and we'll bring in some more this winter. But we think maybe trying a different way of hiring might bring in more people.
Okay, excellent. I appreciate you looking for other means to fill those gaps, and I look forward to perusing the budget that we have in our email and giving it further thought, and we'll get all of our collected questions to you as soon as we can. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve?
Yeah, John, it was a very good presentation, and I actually did open the budget that came this afternoon, and I was absolutely shocked to see the 26-liner, which I request at this time of the year. Every year is a Christmas present, but I've never gotten before until after the first of the year, so thank you for that. Which are the 4 contracts that are as yet unsettled?
Well, the 2 police contracts, the fire contract, and the dispatch contract.
To the police supervision, the police patrol?
Yeah, the only one that actually is out of cycle is dispatch, but the other ones are all, we're still in a contract until the end of this fiscal year with the other ones.
Okay, thank you.
Roland.
Thanks, John. I appreciate the presentation this evening. When are they going to start work on the River Street Tram to remove it? Is there a time frame on that?
So we're at 60% design, and we have some permitting to do this winter and some funding to secure. We will be taking some short-term measures by removing some debris, but the actual major construction won't happen until we have the funding secured, hopefully this year, or in the coming calendar year, 2022.
Great, thank you. When do you think the design committee or the study committee for the transfer station DPW will be put together?
The select board will be discussing that, I think, this winter to stop it. That was a select board goal, a short-term goal, so I believe that it'll be addressed this
Great.
soon.
All right.
Are you interested?
I am.
Okay.
Actually. And I thank you for looking at leasing, which I suggested at the last meeting for the laptops. And I think maybe when you look at other computers and laptops and things like that the town staff has, that should also be addressed at that time too, is looking at leasing versus buying. Because as things progress in our computers rapidly changing and might make more sense at that time to continue that work. So thank you.
Thank you. Jason?
Yes, thank you very much. A couple of things, just as a follow-up to what Mr. Willenhoff asked. What metrics, and a shout out to former member Jeff Burkhart, but what metrics are you using to showcase that the different departments are in need of a greater headcount?
And, they understand what they need to run their department. In the budget, it wasn't showcased because most of them weren't recommended.
Right, so in the past, for example, the fire chief has asked for a greater headcount and you've said no. Clearly you have reasons for doing that. So what tipped the balance for some of these, for some of these new headcounts that you're bringing on board?
I think that we've looked in every way that we can to reorganize and recalibrate, and I think we've, for lack of a better term, squeezed a lot of new resources out of the existing programs. And I think we're at the point now where we've reshifted and reorganized so many ways that there aren't any more available. And that's sort of been my test, is before we hire anybody, let's make sure we can't repurpose another position to help what we want. And I think we did that for the last 3 years, and we're at the point now where there isn't as much to rearrange. And so things like an analyst to help with all the compliance that we do a good job with, but we very easily could miss something, and we want to make sure that we aren't as regulations get more and more complicated. And with the fire staffing, that's another example of where we need to add headcount to be more responsive to residents. The co-response clinician for the police department is something that's a need that's been emerging. And so, we're investing in targeted areas that we know that we need help.
I appreciate you looking for different ways of getting, funding the resources. That's great. That's definitely something that I want to continue to encourage. But at the same time, I would definitely suggest that having concrete metrics on what you're using to define, whether it be you're purposely trying to show faster response time, if you're purposely trying to show less litigation because we're more in compliance, something concrete would be greatly appreciated. Otherwise, it's very hard to tell what the justifications for these new positions are. Corollary to the new position, have you posted, and if you have, I apologize, I haven't seen it yet, have you posted a job description for the mental health, I don't know what you're calling it, the mental health liaison for the police department? And what, can you give us a little more description about exactly what that job role would entail?
Sure. We advertised, we interviewed a handful of people, and we're just doing the background check on the candidate that we've selected. And so we hope to bring them on board in the next month or so. Some of the items that this person will be doing were if you look at the budget for those following at home on page 14 is a description of some of the things that this person will do. Respond when police are called to incidents involving substance misuse or mental health, follow up on those incidents afterwards and connect people with resources, provide training to officers and other staff to help with more consistent response on mental health calls, serve as a conduit to other organizations that provide community-based substance misuse and mental health care, work as a liaison with all the other human services and social services providers that we have in the organization and be part of that team, to have a team-based approach to helping our community members, and a few other things. But they're going to work.
I'm actually very happy to hear that they will be riding along, so to speak, to calls. I think that's probably one of the strongest strongest strengths of that position. Do want to follow up with the 2 hires for the ambulance side. Is this the start of more to come on a shift from a joint firefighter ambulance position, or is this a stopgap measure and you anticipate going back to always hiring people that are both firefighter and paramedic?
So the purpose of this program is to try to target the demand where we see it, which is during the day.
Ambulance right now at a paramedic level, and doing this would allow us to run 2. And we believe that that would provide a higher level of care to the community and the businesses that utilize services throughout the day and the evening, but a majority of calls happen during the day.
And given the sheer imbalance of calls that are medical-based versus fire-based, is this a shift that you intend on continuing over the next 10, 15 years, or is this a stopgap measure?
The program to see if it works, we haven't had a day shift medical team that I'm aware of, and this would be a new program to see if it works. And we certainly, if it does work, we would certainly look to do more of it, but we want to try it and make sure it achieves the goals that we believe it will.
And final question, going back full circle, what are you going to use to measure whether or not, you just said to see if this works, what are you going to use to measure to see if this works?
If we have
Mutual aid calls needed for back-to-back medicals, if we're able to staff a second ambulance consistently with 2 people, the reason that it's a pilot is, like I said earlier, you usually have to hire 8 people to add staffing, and we're trying to add it with 2 to see if it works. So we know it would work if we added 8 because we'd be staffed every day and we'd have plenty of people. The part of trying is to see if we could do it with only 2. And so it's really maximizing an investment, and rather than bringing on 8, which would be very difficult, we want to try and do it with 2 and see if it works.
I definitely think bringing on 2 is the right plan. I would ask you to publish your criteria and come back to us in a year and 2 and show us how you did. That's the strongest way to build your argument for future hires, please. Thank you.
Something quick?
Yeah, just a follow-up, thank you. And this is really more for the Finance Committee and the Select Board, and I mentioned this a few weeks ago, but pulling together a couple of the group's comments, inflation has been above 5% now for 6 months, and as John reminded us, 4 of the contracts are in some process negotiation or working towards their expiration at the end of this fiscal year. This obviously excludes the school budget, but we know 75% of the town money goes towards people, salaries, wages, benefits, et cetera. So just some food for thought when thinking about these numbers is, if you do have that 70 to 75% of the town's budget growing at 5 or 6% or 3 or 4%, that's a real big number, really fast. And obviously these collective bargaining agreements come up. I think they're typically 2 to 3 years in length, but there'll be another set of them right behind that with another elevated inflation number. So, and my guess is, I have no access to this, but everyone uses food, energy, and shelter, and those costs have continued to go up pretty dramatically. So, I think it's something all of us should consider when thinking about the 23 budget, as well as the following ones, is numbers that we can't really control going up at a much greater rate and potentially crowding out these other ideas that are there. So I don't have any prioritization for that, and I'm not a doomsayer or anything like that, but just something that is front and center in the financial markets. Thanks.
Thank you. Mike, something quick?
Yeah, just to reiterate what David was saying, it's like 75% of our budget, when we talk about the schools and the town, is allocated towards salaries and fringe. Backing up, our main source of revenue is the tax levy. The tax levy is not indexed for inflation, but if the tax levy is going against the salary and fringe plan, which is 75% of our budget, and currently experience over 6% inflation rate, I'm sure that will be reflected in the collective bargaining agreements, and we're already behind the eight ball.
Okay, so select board members, any comments or questions? Jim?
Well, as we sort of as we begin to understand more about what equity means, there's been an emerging focus, I mean, like I see it even in the Climate Action Plan, on renters and other apartment dwellers. And we did have requests for renter advocate. And I know it's not part of the current set of select board goals. So that there's one way, sort of a non-creative way of seeing this, which says that we're a long way away from being able to hire such a person. What I wonder about is whether there's a place for working with the Regional Housing Services Office to contract with them for renter advocate, because that could start earlier. If we can find the money for it, it would be a way of addressing the the way that renters are so far removed from the influence and power the way Acton works, and they're squeezed a lot by landlords and management companies. So I wonder what your thoughts were about that, about whether there is a route towards getting more tenant advocacy, perhaps through a contract with the RHSO.
I think that's an interesting idea, and it's something that we can certainly look into. I do know that there are several agencies that provide advocacy for tenants, statewide, regionally, and maybe even locally. And it seemed to be that there are a lot of resources out there that people can connect to. And we often connect people to those resources, whether it's legal services or otherwise. So we are adding a mental health resource to the police department. We are adding a little bit of administrative support to our administration office, which includes our community resources person, Laura, and so she'll have a little bit more help this year with administrative matters through some repurposing. And so I think I'd rather identify a specific need and then figure out a way to fill it, other than knowing that it's an interesting and good idea. I haven't been able to determine exactly how that would fit into our organizational structure, for example.
No, that's it. Just thanks for all the work on this budget. It's very easy, at this level of detail, it's very easy to read through and understand it, and then there's the line-by-line stuff as well in the longer document to dive into the details. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Yes, definitely wanted to echo what everyone has said. This was really informative and helpful. Just a quick question actually related to Isha's question about the sidewalk program. So one thing you mentioned was that this year is going to be mainly focused on doing a comprehensive design and prioritization of what sidewalk projects need to be completed. So is that what the 750 is for? Is that just for the design, or is that just part of the package?
So the way that, thank you for the question. I think the way that we outlined it in the capital plan is, as I mentioned, $17 million. And I think that the best way to do that is, because instead of incrementally designing a little bit, building a little bit, designing a little bit, building a little bit, design a lot of them. So, we wouldn't be able to get through all 18 priorities here, but design a handful to full design, so we have a full cost estimate, and then that we can go to contract out to get it completed. So I think the 750 would be used for mostly design work, and also maybe if there's a few small sidewalk sections that can be accomplished. Just to give you an example, the new stretch of sidewalk from the intersection of 27, where Blackbird Cafe is, and the Veterans Ball Field. That new sidewalk that goes from there to that bridge, the rail trail bridge, that was $500,000 for that. So, I was very excited to get $500,000 approved a few years ago, and then when Corey told me that's all we were to get from it, I said, oh man, we have a lot of work to do. So I think most of it would be for design shovel-ready sidewalks, and then maybe a small portion, if it's left, to do a little piece of Gray Road that we have little chunks to do.
Great, thank you. And I really appreciated the equity focus in this. I think that if there's anything we've learned from this year, it's the increased need for it. And so the fact that we're doing a comprehensive review focused on equity is really exciting. So thank you.
Dean, I see you have your hand up.
Yes, so, I'll go to probably my favorite part of the budget. What I've been advocating for is more support for our urban forestry street tree program. And I was pleased to see that that got included. Probably not the way I would have done it myself, but I think that I support the town manager in the way he's going about this with looking at contractors, certainly enhancing the street tree inventory that got started this year is a great point. And I guess the question as far as reshifting the focus of some of this, I know that under the new reorganization, the cemetery and natural resources crew is getting moved into public works. So I hope that when that consolidation takes place, I hope that we look at, a really comprehensive forestry program. There's a lot of forestry needs in areas that have not been addressed in the past by the tree department. For instance, the tree population, the cemeteries, and a lot of tree issues at the edges of conservation lands, which have sort of, fallen off the edge of the table. So, I support the town manager and what he's doing, and I hope that that will continue. And as the reorganization proceeds, I hope to see more resources allocated in that direction. So, a good start, I would say. Thank you. Thank you. Brad? Yeah.
I just wanted to quickly thank John for his hard work, and it's been fun being on this side and seeing how much work does go into this and the process. And I look forward to Budget Thursday.
Fun in the sense you're not on that side. The one thing I'd like to comment on is the bottom line numbers are really good, because I know that a lot of squeezing had to happen to get us there. The school district is also working on their budget, and they had some preliminary numbers in their last meeting. They have a tough squeeze and has not made as much progress so far. So, kudos to to squeezing it into that number. I look forward to reading the whole document. I'll now open it up to members of the public. Charlie, if you'd like to sit, that's fine. Otherwise, and if anybody else would like to make a comment, I'd ask that you line up behind Charlie. Please go ahead.
I have a question.
Can you just identify yourself first?
Oh, Charlie, kind of like Porter Road. I'll get a tape on that. But anyway, my question is, what's the status of the combined dispatch? Is that going to be part of this budget, or is that still in the works?
So the project that we're undertaking with the town of Concord to look at a regional communication center is still underway, and it will not, it wasn't developed far enough to include it in this budget recommendation, but we expect it to be in next year's.
It's not in this one, okay. I have a request both to the town manager and the select board. Any new positions I would like to see as separate articles on the warrant, which is something we used to do very successfully. then the town meeting can decide whether to approve a new permanent position, staff position for the town. That's my request. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll leave it.
Ann Chung, South Acton. I'd like to know how you're going to do a new fair housing legal review inside the recodification of the zoning bylaws.
Thank you. Great question. So recodification is looking at our existing bylaws and sort of modernizing. It wouldn't be changing them or the policy direction inside of those. It's really just cleaning them up and making them easier to understand. The civil rights fair housing review that I mentioned would actually be used for new bylaw proposals. So if the select board or the planning board comes forward with a new zoning bylaw proposal, this program would be used to vet that new proposal for that equity lens.
Okay, I think I understand, but we'll wait and see.
Thank you.
Good evening, Alyssa Nickel from School Street. I'm going to go out on a limb here. I don't think that this is a politically popular position, but the sidewalk budget is really, really alarming in terms of its scale. So I just wanted to give a shout out to Ms. Christy Anderson for bringing up the point of the additional cost that could come about from putting a lot more sidewalks in town, staff time for plowing. And I also want to mention, since Mr. Mangiarotti talked about the critical nature of stormwater management, with every percentage of impervious surface we add, it increases the chance of flooding by a significant amount. I don't have the numbers in my head, but it's pretty high. So I'd like to see the town be really thoughtful and careful. It makes me nervous when I hear people say we want to put sidewalks wherever anybody wants them. I know they're really critical for families with young children. I raised a family here. We took lots of walks in our neighborhood on streets without sidewalks. My children are both still with us today. But I know there's a lot more people moving into town and a lot more cars on the road and people with their devices. There's a problem with distracted driving. So I do want to just make it clear that I understand that sidewalks are important, but I just want us to be extremely thoughtful about how many and where they go, and not just, blanket the town. It's going to really impact the character. A lot of people move here because it is quasi-rural, and it's going to change the look and the feel of the town if there's sidewalks on every road. Thanks.
Thank you. Don't see any, go ahead, Mr. Manager.
So, thank you. I just wanted to mention that the sidewalk priority list that was established by the Sidewalk Committee is in the capital plan. And also just wanted to mention that if the Public Works Department adds a sidewalk, they very much take into account the stormwater management, and in, I think, every case, improve the stormwater situation on that street by creating a sidewalk, or make sure that they don't make it any worse when making a sidewalk. So I just wanted to mention that.
Thank you. I don't see anybody else here in the room. Matt, could you call on the online hands, please?
Of course, Mr. Chair. Bishop, if you could identify who you are, first and last name, that would be great. You should be able to speak now.
Mark, I live in West Acton.
Go ahead, please.
And I would like to see, with respect to this budget, the requests that the water board made of the city and what was actually approved. I don't see a slide in here for that.
Okay, thank you. I can just say that the water district is a separate entity.
I understand that the water board is a separate entity. However, we're raising educated kids that are going to have cancer, and we both have to work together. The city and the water board both have to work together for us because they serve the exact same population. So there were a number of requests made by the water board of the town manager, and some were approved, and a lot of them weren't. I'd like to better understand that.
So there was, just so you know, there was really just one request, and we approved design money for a PFAS water treatment plant. It has not yet.
Next up will be Deborah Symes again. Deborah, you should be able to speak.
Thank you, Matt. David, this is a question for the town manager. It's really quick. That analyst position, I just want to understand whether that person will be supporting only Public Works and the Sustainability Office, or will that person be supporting, you know, other departments as well? Thank you.
That's the bulk of the departments that you mentioned have the bulk of the compliance
on demand, but certainly if there's any other work that this person could help support, they would. Like everyone else, we all help each other.
Thank you.
And there's one more hand from a Colin user who should be able to speak now.
Hi, this is Tara calling back again. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. So I like the idea of Charlie's idea of having the line item votes on adding positions. And I have some concerns regarding the position about, I thought it was something about analyzing zoning for equity. And my first concern is that I am getting the idea that this is a ploy that has been recommended from developers to get somebody who uses equity as a way to pass zoning that doesn't actually provide equity. So I'm very concerned about hiring somebody to justify or lobby for or against zoning with a vested interest, because the town has a vested interest in the increase of the number of units, and regardless of whether it's actually equity oriented. And so I feel like if there's going to be any analyst about land use zoning and equity, it should be combined to be completely sustainable, you know, land use and water and equity all around, not just to be promoting this 25 unit per acre thing that's coming up that the developers are all circling around and positioning, which it appears like this could be part of that. So I feel like if you can't afford to have a land use attorney or land use analyst to be analyzing the land in full, if they have the capability to understand equity, then they have the ability to understand equity and zoning. If they have that, then they should be able to look at all of our policies, because too often, and I'm almost done, that these quote unquote affordable units aren't affordable. The average Black family makes under $50,000 a year, and none of these units that are being created under the supposed banner of equity are even affordable. And so I am uncomfortable hiring a position where it's not clear exactly what they would do and what vested interests exist. And so I like the idea of having a separate line item, and I do remind people that they can actually amend the budget or move to amend the budget at town meeting to take out for a separate vote items that they are uncomfortable voting for in the full budget. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's all.
Thank you. I just wanted to take a moment to let folks know that the investments that were discussed here tonight are described in more detail in the budget, in particular on page 12 of the budget book. The budget, if you haven't found it yet, it's published at actonma.gov/manager. There's a description of the fair housing project, and it's not anything at all like how it was described by the previous speaker. But if you look on page 16, there's more details about what the fair housing review will look like. And it's not a staff person, it's a contract.
Thank you. Okay, I think we're done with the budget presentation. So if you want to go ahead and close your meeting.
All right, thank you. I will entertain a motion to adjourn. And a second?
Second. Second.
All right, we have to do a roll call vote. Dave? Christy?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Isha?
Aye.
Adam?
Aye.
Roland?
Aye.
Steve? Jason?
Aye.
And I say aye. Thank you all. Have a good night. Thank you, Select Board.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to the upgraded district precinct maps. These maps we've already voted on these, but they were updated once again, so we have to vote again. So, Mr. Manager.
Thank you. Just going to reshare my screen. So the board on October 18th, the board approved new redistricting, the results of redistricting from the state level, which resulted in some new precinct boundaries here in Acton. And since that board vote, the state actually made some more revisions to the maps. And so it's necessary for the board to, how do I get out of this? To consider and approve the new maps.
I think you can just hit escape.
Okay, here we go, sorry. So this, let's see, the map that was approved on October 18th looks like this. As Eva described it, the goal of this was to try to get around 3,000 people in each precinct, and it added a 7th precinct from before we only had 6. And then what they changed, if you pay attention to Route 2, they changed that purple, the 14th Middlesex, comes in a little bit down there, and then let me just go back for a second. They also changed this area right here. And so this creates a split of the 6th precinct. Half of them are in 37th Middlesex, and the other half or so are in the 14th Middlesex. That looks like it would be creating problems for our elections team, but Town Clerk Eva Sklarek has assured me that it's not a problem. Many communities have multiple split districts, and it's just another thing for them to do, and they're okay with it. So with that, I'd ask that the board consider voting this new precinct map, and we will file the necessary paperwork with the State Elections Commission.
Thank you. Any questions from board members? Seeing none, any comments from members of the public? I see none, so I'll take a motion to approve the, we do have one comment. Matt, could you call on the online person, please? There's 2 comments.
Yes, I'm just going to call them in the order that I saw them. Linda Vieira. I hope I pronounced that correctly. If I'm not, please correct me. But you should be able to speak.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So since people will be in different districts than they were before, what is the town going to do to publicize that to the voters that it will affect?
So maybe we're going to see the same thing. So that we
on just 2 meetings ago, I think, to have just one voting location in town. And so people from any of the 7 precincts can go to the same place to vote.
Yes, but there will be a different candidate for the 14th Middlesex as opposed to 37th Middlesex. So when people go to the polls, they need to know who they're going to be voting for. So in the split precinct of, say, precinct 3, how are you going to let people know that the people who were in the 14th Middlesex are now going to be in the 37th or vice versa? Is the town going to do some kind of mailing?
That's a good question. We can pose that question to the town clerk.
So I'm happy to sending out postcards.
You will be sending.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
I'm happy.
And I don't see the other hand any longer. John, is there a name or a date on these? So should we approve the voting map as of? I don't see an identification on there.
Perhaps just the updated map for the precincts.
Okay. I would take a motion to approve the updated precinct map.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. So Fran moved and Himija seconded. Any further discussion? Okay. We'll vote then. Jim, if you would call the roll, please.
Okay, on the question of this, the redone maps, Dean, what are you thinking?
Aye.
Okay. Himija,
Aye.
Fran,
Aye.
David,
Aye.
Jim also says aye. We approve it unanimously.
Excellent. Next item 6, to discuss the renovation of the Parlin House. A meeting or two ago, we asked the design team to move ahead with the design that we saw, but some concerns were expressed, especially by me, that the design had deficiencies with regard to being used as a cultural center. And so the design team moved forward a little bit, and so we can take a further look at that now and see if we have any further comments. Is it possible to show that, John? So while that's happening, I can say that my concerns with the last time was that the design seemed to me to be oriented towards having 2 smaller conference rooms, which could be combined by moving a partition, but instead of towards use as a cultural center. And the other things for the cultural center, for use as a cultural center, like having a food serving area large enough to serve food to 30 people or something like that, and to have storage for tables and chairs. Those were things were not part of the design. I thought it was pretty expensive to get something that didn't meet the needs as a cultural center, since that's what we said we were moving forward with. So this is a little bit of an improvement on that. I have some additional comments, but I'll let you guys go first. Anybody have anything they'd like to say, or I can go first if you guys would prefer.
Go ahead.
Okay, so my concerns, as I just said, that the kitchen area wasn't big enough, the storage area wasn't big enough, and they didn't have room to seat 50 people or 30 people around tables. In this layout, this does barely squeeze the seating in there, although I would still like to see that stretched a little bit more, maybe by, instead of having 2 doors at the back of the house, to have that wall opened, or it opened more than it is in this design, such that that area can be pushed into the lobby area maybe a little bit. Also, the storage in this design is definitely improved, but the storage area is still not large enough to store the tables, folding tables for people to eat around or play a game around or do a project around. And what's titled as a break room here, which has always been an odd term to me because there's no staff in this building, so there's no breaks. The food service area is still not in this drawing big enough for like a refrigerator and a dishwasher, and I'd like to see those. So I would like to see, this is definitely a step in the right direction, but I'd like to see it expanded a little bit more. And if we push back the back of the addition, it doesn't really change the look from the street. The Historic District Commission is mainly looking for what it looks like from the street. Again, pushing back the addition doesn't really change that. Anybody else have comments, questions? Dean, please. Sorry, thank you.
Yes, that unmute. There we go. I think the problem that I see with this is that this thing just keeps getting bigger and bigger. I'm not sure that there's an overwhelming need to have this kind of a facility. Certainly that's within the judgment of the board and ultimately the voters at town meeting. But, the request that the town manager submitted to CPC was for over $1 million. And this is a tough year to ask for that because there's about $1.6 million to allocate under CPC, and we've got about $3 million worth of requests. So any marginal increase that you're advocating on this is just going to make the chances of this getting funded at all from CPC that much less. So I think that, you really got to tie a ribbon around this thing and say this is as big as it's going to get. And frankly, $1 million is a mind-boggling amount of money for this size space. So I just, I really have some second thoughts about this entire project. That's all I've got.
Thank you. Any other members?
So I just wanted to quickly add that I like the idea of having an event here, and maybe trying to come up with a design that would work, that doesn't compromise the exterior or enlarging it in any way. I think that you can bump out the storage space to be the same dimension on the other side as one of the laboratories, just to add more storage. I don't know, this is really early stages. I don't know what the porch looks like. We have no, detailed schematics, so I don't really know what the outside is gonna totally look like, but maybe getting the interior space to work to hold such an event or a cultural center would be advantageous for the town.
Others? Jeff?
Okay. So I appreciate the feedback that was taken from this meeting, and clearly there were some improvements made. Sorry, just a quick question. So based on the new design now, will catering be possible in this space? Just to clarify.
So it's, I think, a judgment. You can look at, so there's what the thing is that it's the food serving area is currently entitled to break room in this drawing, right? If people brought in, for a cultural event, food for, say, 30 people, there's not room to put down food for 30 people on that counter. And especially if you take a little bit of that counter for, say, a microwave and a coffee maker, you have less room to put the food down. And there's no room in there now for a refrigerator or a dishwasher, right? I'd like to see this building stocked with, some servingware, so that we don't have to have paper plates every time and throw out paper plates every time. We just put them in the dishwasher. I'm not looking for a commercial grade dishwasher and refrigerator. I'm just looking for a household, grade dishwasher and refrigerator. And for me, it's a matter of, the whole thing is looking at like $1.4 million. And if what we get from that is 2 conference rooms, that to me is not a good use of the taxpayers' money. What we don't have in town is a place for cultural events in the winter. We have a couple places in town where people can either use the structures at NARA or put up a tent, where during the summer months, where it's comfortable to be outside, you can have a cultural event and it's just fine. But if you want to have a cultural event in January, or even this time of year, right, it's difficult, right? Where are you going to do that? We don't have any facility like that. And to me, there's a pretty small differential in making this, $700,000 a piece for 2 conference rooms, or, a similar amount of money for something that's really usable as a cultural space. So that's where I'm coming from. If someone, I appreciate what Dean said about, not wanting to make the project any bigger, but, could I in good faith support this even in town meeting for, something that didn't gain the town anything? In my mind, right? Some people might think that, a support area and 2 conference rooms is good, but that's not, to me, that's not good.
And then, sorry, 2 more quick
Oh,
questions. One is, do we have any details on the AV capabilities that will be in this space?
I don't know if we have an answer to that. I put together a list of things, which is actually in this file in the packet, that said that we needed a couple of wall monitors and a speaker and a microphone and that kind of thing. So, I think that's part of the cultural space too, because, in this kind of configuration that's on the screen, up front you want a speaker or maybe a musician or, I don't know, whatever, people would like to program in this space. And absolutely, you need some, or maybe even show a movie, right, or something.
Got you. And then, sorry, my last question. This is going back a little bit, but I was wondering kind of what the stages were for community feedback. Was there any feedback that we got from the community on specific uses that they wanted from a cultural center? And was that feedback incorporated? This is like a very generic question.
I think the answer to that, as far as I know, is indirectly.
Okay.
Right, so there is a group of people that have been advocating for a cultural center. I've spoken with them. I don't know, maybe others have spoken with them. And I got a general sense of what they want. And, this is still a limited space, but we have to make it at least meet some, in my mind, some minimum capabilities here to be able to satisfy what they wanted.
Got you. Yeah. Based on kind of, thank you for that info. I think based on what everyone said, I do agree. I think that there does need to be a little bit more detail on this, specifically around, how are we going to, with this pretty big budget, accommodate a needs that we know and assume that a cultural center needs. But I'd also be interested to see if there's any way we can get direct community feedback, specifically on what people are looking for and what gaps this particular space can address and how we are going to address that. Thanks.
Thank you. Others, Jim?
I think, from the birth of this project, we always knew it was going to be a challenge. It was going to be expensive just to get this into a space that's usable at all. And we decided, because of the, historic cultural significance of it, to go ahead and do that. I'm feeling like it would be good plan to proceed at a minimum cost level to get us something that, looks like this. I'm not in favor of trying to turn it into, a full space for, a kitchen, for example. If I was planning a large cultural event in Acton, I would look towards condo clubhouses, church basements, and very wealthy people's houses. There's a combination of spaces there that can hold a lot of people and are fully furnished. I think this is going to be a cute little space that's going to have some meeting rooms, and it'll occasionally have really fun events. If I was planning food there, what I would do is first I wouldn't put out all 50 chairs. I would put in, or 60 seats that are shown there. I'd bring in some rectangular tables near a big outlet so I could have a hot plate and a place for people to put their dirty dishes.
Can you show the other drawing?
There is.
It's in that one.
Yeah. So that's more like how many round tables can you fit in there? But even taking a few of those out to make room for a temporary setup for a little food service, I think would be an acceptable way of doing it. When you think about the number of events in Acton, there's a lot of really wonderful but relatively small events that happen in Acton, and I think this could be a space for it. The worst scenario is, deadlock, empty, inadequate, strangely, partially demolished house sitting there in the off the parking lot. So that's the thing I want to avoid. And the easiest way forward seems to be a simple, functional design. Thanks.
Thank you. Dean, please.
Thank you. Just another thought about this. We're already paying some pretty good rent for a facility that provides exactly what you're looking for. I'm thinking about the Human Services Center up on Sudbury Road. We've got parking for 110 cars up there. We have a very expensive commercial kitchen that meets all codes. We've got lots of meeting room space for events. And it's not getting used after about 5 o'clock at night or Saturdays and Sundays. So I think that if you're looking for these larger events and you want to serve food, why don't we make better use of what we're already paying for? And, I certainly second Jim's idea about, let's do the best we can so that we're not looking at a derelict house anymore. But I think that there has to be some limit to what, do we really need 2 of these things where we've already got a really nice one on Sudbury Road? Thank you.
Are there comments from people in the room here?
Christy, please.
Hi, Christy Anderson, Main Street. As a troop leader, we have often needed space. You end up, for a lot of the Girl Scout troops, working in churches and other places because the town has no support for that. I fully support a community center, and this is entirely insufficient for that, if nothing else because of the infrastructure. Looking at you, none of you are stay-at-home moms or dads or other identified genders. Parking is impossible many days of the week when it's nice because of the playground usage. Tuesday mornings during story time at the library, people are parked on the street. And yes, there's a parking lot over behind the fire station, but absolutely no one knows about it. They all just park here. This seems like searching desperately for a use for that building, which to me, it's pretty obvious could become offices similar to the Red Building when Town Hall doesn't have enough space. It's extremely, extremely expensive for what we're getting out of it. I would much rather see this money used elsewhere, another way, this building used in a different way. I'm curious whether the Morrison Farms building was similarly looked at. I believe it has a larger footprint if we're looking for buildings we already own to be used in some way. And I think, given the number of seats I see here, that parking just isn't going to happen. Even if you come in an evening when it's nice out and families are using the playground. I've had play dates get canceled because people couldn't actually find parking here. So this definitely needs to be explored more, if nothing else, on the parking perspective.
Thank you.
Alyssa Nickel, School Street. I think the biggest disconnect for me here is the use of the phrase cultural center. I think when people hear that phrase, a lot of very different things come into their mind. So I decided to go and look back at the original proposal from Bettina Abe and Vivian Burchell, and it sounds like they sent it to the town manager on April 5th of this year. But from their proposal defining a cultural center, it's more in line with what I had envisioned when I heard that phrase. A place to protect, encourage, and support activities related to the arts and creative sectors, such as film, dance, literature, music, sculpture, and painting as they relate to language, heritage, and diversity. So when I heard the term cultural center, and I signed this petition for Bettina and Vivian, I was imagining a place that I might go and see a slideshow, or hear a lecture, or look at artwork on walls, just like the art displays that happen in the meeting room in the library. I wasn't thinking of festivals and fairs and food, because those kinds of things happen in larger spaces like Nara Park, or in larger spaces indoors, as Dean suggested, the senior center, or I don't know what it's called, but Audubon Hill. My daughter used to take West African dance when she was younger, and every year at the Harvard Elementary School, Harvard, Mass, they had a cultural festival that was run at the elementary school. So families from all over the world set up tables with, clothing and artifacts and photographs and food, and families would just walk around with their little passports and have a cultural experience. And then they all went into the auditorium where they had performances. So they had music, and they had Diablo juggling, and they had dance. So we have a lot of facilities in town that can support the grander vision of what I think we're talking about when we say cultural center, and the original proposal, I think, was smaller, and it actually fit into the needs that were identified back in 2011, 2012 for more meeting spaces, for library programming, the green space for book sales, or the plant sales for the garden club. So I think that what we had seen a couple weeks ago, where we're preserving the original house, building on the service wing in the back with accessible bathrooms, with a kitchenette and storage space, is acceptable for this, and it will hopefully keep the cost down. I'm not sure exactly where the really high price tag is coming from. I don't know if it's the stairwell into the basement or solar panels. I don't know. Maybe it's just the sidewalk and the landscaping that is, and the parking lot and the pathways. I mean, granite pavers are really, really expensive. So maybe that's where the majority of the cost is coming from. And I know it's an old house and needs a lot of stabilization. But I don't think it's fair for us to frame this as, $2,000 a square foot and just look at the house, or $700,000 per meeting room or conference room, because it's not just the building, it's the entire space. And we didn't buy this house with no purpose in mind. We bought this house in 1996, and it fulfilled its purpose by giving us the land that we built the library parking lot on, and the land for the septic system for that expansion. So this is just a bonus for us, and I know it has a big price tag, and we should be very concerned about trying to keep that down. But the reason it has a big price tag is because we haven't done the project for 25 years since we purchased it. So I think reining it in as much as we can and being creative about looking at other options. This room reminds me a lot of the basement, the Cooper room at the Rubenhor Library in Littleton, the old library, where I taught yoga classes and I took my kids for programming. It had 2 columns right in the center of the room, and the tables and the chairs were stored on the racks against the walls. And we went to live animal programs there, we went to book talks there, we went to lectures, we had, Lego club there. It was constantly used, and I think this is going to be constantly used by our boards and committees for meetings and by town staff and library staff for their programming needs. Thanks.
Thank you. So I saw from the designer, just by the way, that the price per square foot is, I think, $700 a square foot. So I don't know where the 2,000 came from. I don't see anybody else here in the room. Matt, can you call on the people online, please?
Of course. First up is going to be Jason Cole. Jason, you should be able to speak.
Yes, hello, can you hear me? Yes. Jason Cole, 63 Neshoba Road. In answer to where the $2,000 a square foot came from, you take the $1.4 million and you divide it by the square footage of the house, and it comes to about 1965. I took the liberty of rounding up. Secondly, to answer Select Board Member Najireji's question, I was on the public forum before this was identified to be a cultural center, and the town and the consultants were asking open-ended questions about what we needed. One person, who wasn't me, asked for parking for the town hall and the library and wanted the building raised. That was a former member of the Finance Committee. Again, not me. In response to Ms. Nickel, it is not a bonus building if it costs us more than $1 million to have use out of it. That is the same argument as throwing good money after bad. It would be a bonus if we actually were able to use it cheaply for outdoor space and parking. So I'm all for turning this back into outdoor space. Just this evening, we heard from the town manager, something to the effect of, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, we hear every week that we need more sidewalks. We also hear that there are plenty of needs for things that we have to do, that we have to continue to do for the existing level of service that the town has come to expect. Also, we know that the costs and inflation are going up, and that meeting the requirements of Proposition 2.5 are going to become more and more onerous. So why are we contemplating spending money on a building that doesn't meet our needs? As a corollary, can we please approach the Historical Commission with a proposal to return this space to something truly historical, like native wildflowers that long predated this house, and a house that isn't even as old as one of the ones on my street. This is an eyesore. This is a solution this is a problem that we don't need to fix. We need to get rid of this space. We need to stop having it on our books. We need to stop discussing wasting money at this. Let's get rid of this property one way or the other. And let's not invest, quote unquote, more than $1 million for something that doesn't solve any of our problems. Please do not do this when we have real, clear, honest to goodness needs of things in town. Saving a derelict old house is not in the best interest of the town. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next up is David Hahn. David, you should be able to speak.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. So just in terms of the last caller, there's no way the Historic District Commission is going to approve a demolition of this building. So let's just get that off the table. The town has punted on this building for 25 years. So if it's derelict, it's the town's fault. And as a taxpayer, I expect them to do something about it. In terms of the scheme, I don't think you should be focused on the cost of this, because it really hasn't, to my knowledge, been costed out. You don't have a set of working drawings. You don't have any bids. Everybody's jumping on big numbers. I just don't believe some of the cost. As far as I know, there's no cost estimate except on the previous schemes which are far more elaborate. In terms of this scheme, I think it's headed entirely the right direction. I do agree about it needs more storage and it needs a better kitchen service facility. And other than that, it's very simple. It's a very simple building to do. It's not elaborate. It shouldn't, we don't want to make a mountain out of a molehill here. It's a modest space, and I think it will get tremendous use, even if it's a 30-person room that's divisible and used for a lot of different functions. So I don't think it's a non-space that won't get used. I think it'll get heavily used. So that's all I'll say about it for right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Dong Wang. Don, you should be able to speak.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, and my name is Don Wong. I'm a resident Lexington Drive of Acton, and I have been a Acton Boxborough Cultural Council member for 3 years. So I was pretty upset when people say culture is important in this town, because as an ABCC member, I have seen how much impact our cultural activity made to our town. To me, and culture is the soul, is the heart of this town. It brings so much vitality. It gives artists so much opportunity, gives young people so much opportunity, gives everybody so much opportunity to connect with each other. So in our town with 26% of Asian population, 33% of Asian students, just as an example, we have becoming very diverse town. We each brought so much culture, heritage in this town to enrich our life. We don't have a place today. We can even indoor specifically for small performance, for a lot of cultural exchange. Each year when we have a reception for ABCC, we have to go to Boxborough to use their libraries, and because we don't have a similar space in here. And based on that experience, I think this is slightly smaller, but can serve at least 90% of function I was thinking of, at least for that particular event, when we have people singing, doing dancing, we have place for people to entertain, serving some food. So we do badly need such a space. And given its location in our town centers, I think this is going to be so well used, so well managed, and the outdoor space is going to make it so much more interesting. We can do a lot of mixed use. We can have a lot of variety of events. And I also like the suggestion to enhance the AV functions. So we can do a little projection and for small, for slides, etc. And I also like the idea to increase a little bit of storage. And as part of the core advocacy group, and for ASAPOL, for this particular project from early this year, and I have been trying to collect some input. I will continue to do that from the community. And also, we very appreciative, and we are able to locate and approve $400,000 from APA fund, and to get this project started. And this is our time. This in the age of improving DEIC, we don't just talk about things. We need to get things down. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I apologize, I was on mute. Next up will be Bettina. And I apologize again if I've said any names incorrectly.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Hi, thank you so much for letting me speak. Thank you, Alyssa Nickel, for your comments. Thank you, David Hahn, for your comments. And thank you, my dear friend Don Wong, for yours. Last year, when Vivian Birchall and I had been talking Vivian said it was her dream that we could have a gathering place in Acton for folks from different cultures and different parts of the world. And knowing from my experience how hard it is to book a room at the library, I thought, well, we've got this building right on campus and we've put a lot of money into saving the building. Old buildings are wonderful. It's right here on our central campus. Why not have an extension of the library using the same booking process and the same exact contract and requirements for booking a room at the library, except it would be designated the APCC, the Asa Parlin Cultural Council. And in our proposal, Vivian and I put a definition of culture, just as we have mentioned tonight. And Alyssa was speaking and Dawn was saying, you know, an opportunity for young people to get together, whether it's dance or poetry or art or music or drama, but it has everything to do with culture, diversity, equity, inclusion, providing a very important place that our master plan says people in our community need and want is opportunities to gather. So it's not like big and elaborate and fancy like we are putting on massive plays at RJ Gray or you know, other meeting space that we have in town, like the rec center, which is also heavily booked with recreation programs. This is a careful and considerate designation of a space just for culture, just for diversity, equity, and inclusion, for people to be able to gather, not just have a kitchenette, not so that you can cook there, because, you know, I spoke to Cheryl Ball about it, and it would be the same rules as the library. You can bring in food to the APCC that is cooked in a health department approved kitchen. You can't cook food on the site. So it would be just like a little kitchenette. But I won't prattle on, but I really do hope that you continue to consider and really read our proposal, because our community really wants this, and it would be a dream come true for a lot of our wonderful diverse groups in Acton. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, one more hand from a call-in user. You should be able to speak now. Please just let us know who you are and where you're calling from.
Hello, this is Tara. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. So I would vote for this simply because Dawn and Bettina want it, frankly. I say let's give it to them. They'll make good use of it. That said, I don't think that a 30 by 30 building or whatever this is enough for a community center for 23,000 people. I feel like we should buy the Kmart building, as I've said many times. Let's not also forget that we have plenty of unused spaces. The senior center, for example, the schools are often unused and so difficult to book them. There's so many rules. You got to pay so much money to use the schools. It's impossible. We already pay for it. It should be free to people who want to use it. And I would like to see that whatever happens to be open past 9 p.m. Getting chased out of the library at 8:45 makes it very difficult to have cultural events when culture often doesn't even start until somebody's had dinner at 8:30 in a lot of cultures. So anyway, save the building as cost effectively as possible. And Dawn and Bettina, go for it. Thank you.
Thank you. So that's it on the public comment. I don't know if we want to.
We're, you know, as a board, still have kind of a mix of opinions. It's, is there, you know, anything that we have in common to give to the designers going forward? Jim?
Well, it does seem, because of the conflict between the pricing and the features, that maybe we want to, if there's a way to understand more about the costs and the components of the cost, that might be very useful. I understand the challenge of, you can't get a real cost until you have an actual design that you agree on. But I wonder, even in this basic configuration here, if there's a way of understanding, what the elements, what the major costs are, then we might be able to have a conversation about, well, gosh, if we didn't spend money on this aspect, that might bring the cost down to the point where we'd want to, pay for, a little bit more of an upgrade to make it serve, other purposes. That's one thought about how to proceed.
So I want to just say, I'm not necessarily, I'm definitely proposing that this thing just be a little bit bigger, but not necessarily more expensive, right? Having a bigger closet and longer counters is not necessarily, we're not talking doubling the price or anything, right? I just want to make sure that what we do here has value. To me, this has the opportunity to be a real gem on the town hall campus, town hall and library campus. I just want to make sure that that we're just not a little short of what's needed. And I think we're pretty close. So I'm not looking to make this twice as big or something, right? I just want to make sure that it handles a diverse set of cultural events. Hemija, please.
Yeah, I'll just chime in and say, this was definitely, this was one of our select board goals, so I think the general consensus is that we do support the transformation of the center into something that is significant to our town as way of a cultural center or some place where we can celebrate the diversity of our town. I think what I would particularly be interested in is looking more into the AV capabilities, and if there's any way we can solicit feedback either informally with people just emailing us or through a more systemic effort. I think it would be, for me, I think the crux of this is really trying to understand what people are looking for in a cultural center and seeing and kind of basing the design based on that, if that makes sense. So for example, if, the purpose of the room kind of, like Alyssa pointed out, is more so of a intimate space where, we can highlight artwork and other aspects of our town art, like, I think that for me, the size would be less of a deciding factor. If it's something that we do need a bigger space for, then that's something we should accommodate. But I think essentially, this is me rambling, but I think that I think that I just kind of want to see what the community thinks, what that feedback looks like, and really making sure that we're being responsive to what people in this town really want and need and catering the space towards that.
Fran, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I just wanted to, I don't know if I should ask you or John what the next steps are. I would love to maybe have the architects tweak the plan a little bit and make the storage space and kitchen larger. And I don't know where we are with them, if they're going to fire the town of Acton. But I would like to see maybe enlarging that space.
So, John, would it be possible to tweak the design and then have a public forum to get feedback on the design?
Well, certainly. We did have a public forum which brought us to the design that I'm showing on the screen now. There's two options. One, keep the addition. One, take the addition away. The public gave us a lot of input on that. I think it was in October of last year, maybe we had it, and that's how we got to where we are now. And we have an application into the CPC for CPA funds, and I think it would be really helpful if we could move forward. We're not going to have time to do another design and cost estimate before the CPC does their work. So I think it's critical, from my perspective, to advance this project this year and not miss this town meeting. So I'd strongly recommend that the board consider, it already voted at the last meeting to move forward on the design without the 70s edition. And I think that we could move forward as voted last time with direction from this board to try to maximize the space and the value out of that option. And if that includes an add alternate to add a little bit more to the addition, then we can include that in the design. But I wouldn't want to hold a new public forum and start the process over again, because we've gotten to a pretty good point here, and I don't want to miss another year.
I see nods. Everybody kind of okay with that?
Yes.
And Dean?
Yeah, so I think I'll agree with the town manager that, you know, if you want to bring this forward, now's the time to do it. The application's already gone into CPC. That's going to be a decision made by the CPC whether to fund this at all. And, you know, I just think looking at the other priorities that CPC is looking at, you know, supporting open space, other historic projects, and affordable housing, this is a really big ask this year. So my own hunch is that we probably will be talking about this again next year.
Okay, thank you. Jason, I'm not taking more comment at this time. Sorry.
John, do you think you have what you need?
So the board voted previously to move forward with this design, and so we submitted the CPC application actually with an A and B, and I don't remember which is which, but we're going to refine that to whichever one the board voted last week or earlier this month. And then with direction, you know, it's already happened, and we've already revised that concept to what some of the feedback we heard last week. And so I think we can iteratively continue to do that as we get to the next stage of design. And as I mentioned, if it makes sense, add alternates for an extra X on the addition and what that would cost us. X being a square foot number, not an X.
Okay. Sounds like we're done with this. Okay, item 7, approve municipal support of universal school meal legislation sign-on letter. So there's a letter in the packet, Mr. Manager.
Yes, this is our partners at MAPC are leading an effort with all of its members community to advocate for food security, and this is asking whether the board wants to sign on to the letter, and I'm trying to find it.
I have it. I could share it if you want.
Oh no, I'm just trying to show it to you all. I've seen it. I'm just trying to find it for So it's written as a letter to the Joint Committee on Education, and it's in support of H714 S314, which is filed by Representative Vargas and Senator Domenico, and it's a 2-page letter, but in the end it says, the undersigned respectfully urge the committee to seize the opportunity presented by this moment and make universal school meals permanent, which will end stigma, eliminate childhood food insecurity, promote long-term health, and encourage success for all.
Is there any discussion from board members? I'm in favor of signing this. I think it makes sense to have this program be universal. Any comment from members of the public? Seeing none, I'll take a motion to approve the letter supporting universal school meal legislation.
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
So Himija moves, Jim seconds. Jim, would you call the roll, please?
Sure. On this question of supporting universal school meal legislation sign-on letter, Dean Charter?
Aye.
Imogen Nagaredi,
Aye.
Brian Arsenault,
Aye.
David Martin,
Aye.
and Jim Snyder Grant also says aye. That's unanimous.
Excellent. Item 8, designation of a select board liaison to the Acton Boxborough Community Resource Network. Jim, this is something you brought forward. You want to speak to it?
Sure. So the Acton Boxborough Community Resource Network meets once a month on Thursday mornings. They've been meeting for a number of years. They provide an opportunity for human service professionals to share information and network and plan collaborations to benefit both communities. In the past, we've had select board members there. In the past, it was John Benson and Joan Gardner who attended on behalf of the board. More recently, I've been going, and there's a lot of town staff there from both towns and many agency representatives. I think it's a great way to stay in touch with what's going on, and occasionally to be able to offer information about what the town is up to and what the select board priorities are. I'm happy to continue to be the rep. It seems like it might be good to make it official, to actually have a vote to that effect. And also, just wondering if anybody else on the board would like to attend, either formally to be voted in as a liaison, or informally just to get the invites, because it's easy to get on the invite list.
Okay, so why don't we just take, well, we can have a little more discussion, but we'll take 2 votes. One is if we would like a liaison to the Community Resource Network, and second, who would be the designee. My only problem with this is that this would be 46 things that we need liaison to, and it's not divisible by 5, which I think is a real problem. But other than that, I think it's a good idea. So any other discussion?
No, I'm happy to move that we establish a formal liaison to the Acton Boxborough Community Resource Network.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, before we vote, I just want to make sure anybody from the public want to comment, either online or in the room. Seeing no one, we'll vote. Jim, will you call the roll, please?
Sure. Dean Charter?
Aye.
Imogen Nagaredi?
Aye.
Brian Arsenault?
Aye.
David Martin?
Aye.
Jim Snyder Grant also says aye. We're fine with this.
Excellent. And so the second part of this is who should be the liaison? Anybody want to nominate Jim? Okay. So, the way we do this for the other ones, actually, this doesn't have to be a real vote. If you remember that during the thing, we just did a thumbs up. If you're willing, Jim, anybody? So, Dean, you want to give Jim a thumbs up or a thumbs down as a liaison? Excellent. So, we got 5 thumbs up.
Okay.
We'll move on to item 9. Congratulations.
Thanks.
Now you have 10 committees, we all have 9. Item 9, designate the town manager to sign refinance documents and related related to affordable housing units. Mr. Manager.
Thank you. Our Regional Housing Services Office helps manage our affordable units that are within the community, and every once in a while they say, hey, we need you to sign this document. And I said, are you sure that I can? And they said, yes. I said, well, why don't we just check with council? And so basically, I'm asking the board to authorize me to sign these just to make sure that it's clear. And these are units that are either refinanced because the person that lives there just wants to refinance, or in some cases, there's turnover. But I think the specific ask here, and there's a document that legal put together with a specific motion asking you to designate me the administrative responsibility of signing these refinance documents. So I'm happy to take any further questions.
I can. So as the monitoring body, the town is party whenever these units get refinanced, and in some cases, we can, if they were being actually transferred, mostly in these cases they're being refinanced, but if they were transferred, the the town has the opportunity to buy them, and we have to decline that opportunity officially in the case of a refinancing. So maybe I can go ahead and read the motion, then we can have any final discussion. So I would take a motion to authorize the town manager to act as the select board's designee for the purpose of acting on the following administrative matters, not requiring the attention of the select board, where the town is required to act in order to ensure that such matters are acted on promptly. A, approval of mortgage refinancing, leasing of the unit, or subordination of the town mortgage due to refinancing. B, declining to exercise the town's right to purchase ownership of units or any portion thereof upon notice of the the owner's intention to sell, dispose of, or otherwise convey the property, or locating an eligible purchaser for same. C, obtaining, recording, signing, and acknowledging compliance certificates prior to the resale of any affordable units. D, reviewing and approving minor amendments to previously executed regulatory agreement. E, submitting any information, documents, or certifications requested by DHCD to evidence the continuing compliance of a LIP project sponsor and town with any regulatory agreement terms, including the required annual certifications that the LIP units are generally being maintained in a manner consistent with the applicable DHCD regulations, guidelines, regulatory agreements, and deed riders. F, giving notice to the DHCD of any default, violation, or breach of either a LIP project sponsor or the town. And G, approval of annual rents for LIP rental projects. Before we have any further discussion, I'd like to just take get that moved by someone and seconded by someone. So someone want to make that motion?
So moved.
So Fran moves. Will someone second?
Sure, I'll second.
Okay, and Jim seconds. Any further discussion?
Quick question, is this consistent with the AHA requirements? Seems to be related to housing authority documentation. And this has not been done before, is this new?
So I'm pretty sure, and the town manager can comment, that this applies not necessarily to AHA units, but any LIP projects, affordable units, regardless of who owns them, and they're typically owner occupied. Mr. Manager, I don't know if you already can get
Sure. Yes, and this has been done before, but it's been once. The rapid pace of closings and all the things that have been happening, we thought it'd be a convenience to the residents to have a blanket authorization for me to do it rather than go to the board each time and wait for the meeting cycle, which doesn't always coordinate with the closing cycle for these units. There's not a lot, it's reviewed by our housing group, and it's really just a procedural thing.
So I just want to look for something here for a second, Charlie, that I think answers your question, because I asked the same question. Give me just 1 second, please. I just add, it's not just typically owner-occupied. These particular units are always owner-occupied.
Always what?
Owner-occupied. So these are not AHA units. Any other comments or questions from members of the public or the board? Okay, we'll vote then. Jim, could you please call the roll?
Dean Charter?
Aye.
Imogen Nagaredi?
Aye.
Fran Arsenault?
Aye.
David Martin?
Aye.
Jim Snyder Grant also says aye. That's approved.
Excellent. Discuss a minor change to the Water Resources Advisory Committee charge. Himija, please.
Thank you. So yes, RAC asked me to put this on the agenda because they recently, or we actually approved the appointment of 2 associate members to RAC. and we'd like to make them full members, but there are currently 4 full members, and so promoting 2 to be full members would require us to change the charge to outline that RAC consists of 6 voting members. So that's essentially why I brought this to the board, to see if that could be possible. Just want to provide a little bit of context. So the 2 members that we're hoping to promote to full members are Joe Robb and Mike Geis. Both of them bring a wealth of expertise to RAC. I've seen their participation firsthand, and I think that they would be really valuable members.
And is it, so this change is something you're recommending?
Yes.
Any other discussion, questions on the part of the board? Jim?
I just want to make sure that the RAC felt like that the committee charge with this minor change would be sufficient for them to proceed with the water study.
To my understanding, yes. The topic of discussion really with changing this to 6 members was the change in quorum. So they would now require 4 to be of quorum. But the group consensus was, or I felt was that, and actually they did vote this in, so it was actually an official vote, but they did feel that that would be okay. They typically do have almost full membership at all their meetings.
Great. No more questions.
Any other questions or comments? Members of the public?
Alyssa Nichols, School Street. Can I just get a clarifying piece of information from Mr. Snyder Grant? Were you asking if with 6 full members, the RAC can complete the water study on their own without any outside consultants or staff support?
No, I just want to make sure that working on the water study was within the scope of their current charge.
Okay.
Not that they would be solely, because no one's ever thought that they would be solely responsible for it.
Okay,
Yeah.
fabulous, thank you.
And if I can add, sorry, I should have elaborated, Jim. So yes, RAC is moving forward with planning for their water study, and we'll hopefully be presenting on December 20th, as you mentioned, about that. They've been working really hard and really diligently to take in advice from all ends to really make sure that the proposal that they put forth to the select board is one that was made with much deliberation and intent to really put forth something that the town can really use.
Thank you. Seeing no comment from any direction here, I would take a motion to approve the change to the RAC charge, changing the membership from 5 to 6 full members.
So moved.
Just to be clear, it says voting members in the charge, not full members.
Second.
Sorry, no, please go ahead. So Imogen moves, Fran seconds. Jim, would you call the roll, please?
I'd be happy to on this Water Resources Advisory Committee charge. Dean Charter.
Aye.
Imogen Agaretti.
Aye.
Fran Arsenault.
Aye.
David Martin.
Aye.
Jim Snyder Grant, also aye.
Okay, and finally, our consent items. I'll read the items. If you, any member here would like to hold one of them, please say so. Item 11, approve meeting minutes November 1st and November 15th, 2021. 12, approve executive session. I think that means it's executive session minutes November 1st and 5th, 2021. 13, accept grant of easement 289 Main Street. 14, accept gift natural resources from Natalie Haight for $1,349 for a memorial bench to be placed at Great Hill Conservation Land. 15, accept gift from Friends of Bruce Freeman Rail Trail for $7,200 for construction and maintenance of interpretive panels in the East Acton Village Green. 16, approve request from the Green Advisory Board to host hybrid meetings. 17, committee appointment, Anita Rogers, full member, Historic District Commission, term to expire June 30th, 2024. I will take a motion to approve consent items 11 through 17 inclusive.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
So Jim moves, Fran seconds. Jim, would you call the roll, please?
Sure. On all those consent items, Dean? Aye. Himija?
Aye.
Fran?
Aye.
David?
Aye.
Jim? Aye. Yes.
And if no one has anything else, I would take a motion to adjourn.
Ooh, yeah, I'll do that one.
Okay.
Second?
Okay, made and seconded, and final roll call of the day, please.
Okay. Dean Charter? Aye. Himija Nagarreddy?
Aye.
Fran Arsenault?
Aye.
David Martin?
Aye.
Jim Snyder Grant says aye. Poof, we're done.
Good night, everyone.